What is one moment when you realized you just screwed up? Not my screw up necessarily, but I invited a friend over for a barbecue. They didn't know anyone and has never been to my house, but seemed really eager to go. So I was a little irritated that he was almost 2 hours late. I was just about to text him when I happened to look over my neighbor's fence. The neighbor was also having a barbecue. It was like it happened in slow motion. I saw my friend in the neighbor's yard chatting up some old lady, our eyes locked. I saw the realization literally hit his face. Still laugh about it. I swear, the guy turned white. Game is game. Story 2. Holiday party at a friend's house. I'd never been in a luxurious neighborhood. I was unfamiliar with completely legible house numbers plastered somewhere illogical. Parked in the street and had to walk through newer construction townhomes with long goddamn staircases and 2-inch tall house numbers. Heard a party going and thought, well, this has to be them. Who else would be having a party with this many people over? Waltz right in, say hi to the dog, start chatting with various people, grab a drink and start thinking, I should recognize at least 3 people here. I wonder where they are. I was asked the inevitable, so how do you know Jack and Jill? Oh, right, I don't. I think I'm at the wrong house. The hosts were super cool about it, knew my friends and pointed me in the direction of their actual house. Met up with my friends and regaled them with a story of confusion. It was wildly embarrassing, but I swiftly forgot after a few drinks. Story 3. One time I was throwing a party or something and copy-pasted the same text to a bunch of people. Before group chats were big. I had forgotten to invite one girl I worked with, so I hit paste and sent a little later. I forgot that I wanted to save some corn link or something and sent her that instead. I came up with some BS excuse that it was a link some weird friend had sent me or something, but holy crap, I almost crawled out of embarrassment. Story 4. It's been almost 30 years since this happened and I still have nightmares. Freshman year of college. The first set of college finals, I was totally prepared and ready to take them all. I had almost straight A's going into finals. I go to my last one, which was a throwaway 3 credits of introduction to sociology. I sit down and ready to ace it and look up at the board to see biology 103. That's weird. I pull out my calendar. The sociology final was yesterday. Dang. Story 5. I was at a bar chatting with some friends. My girlfriend was across the room sitting with some other friends. Some intoxicated dude showed up and started doing inappropriate stuff. I jumped up, pushed him away, and yelled, "Screw off." Then he turned around and I realized he was like twice my size and not in the fat way, in a tall, muscular way. I mean, I did the right thing, but if the bartender hadn't leapt over the bar and jumped in between us immediately, that guy would have wiped the freaking floor with me. The moment the dude turned around, I thought, crap, this is gonna hurt. Story 6. I had a moment during a dental cleaning about 15 years ago when the hygienist was flossing between my teeth and above the taste from my gums. There was this overwhelming awful taste from all the crap that got trapped between my teeth and rotted, and was then being pulled out by the floss. That was after she'd spent 30 minutes scraping calculus off my teeth. I was always good about brushing, but didn't do anything else back then, and I wore retainers at night, which makes your mouth completely nasty. That was the moment when I realized just how awful my dental hygiene was, and it disgusted me. After that appointment, I slowly became obsessed with dental hygiene. At my last cleaning, the dentist told me, "It's obvious that you take very good care of your teeth. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because it's working." Thankfully, I started doing that at a fairly young age. I do have some fillings left over from that time and a few teeth that had to have crowns because the fillings started breaking down, but I haven't had a new cavity in a very long time. I have a routine that takes about 10 minutes. I use a water pick, then floss, brush, and rinse with Crest Pro Health mouthwash. The water pick is what made a really big difference with my gums. It flushes food particles from between your teeth and around the side of your mouth, and stimulates your gums, which is part of what keeps them from being wounded. Story 7. A while back, I was doing laundry and noticed our washer had a bit of a funky smell to it. I looked up some home remedies online that involved baking soda and vinegar, and while I was standing at the washer, I thought, a cup of bleach wouldn't hurt. As soon as I threw it in and started the washer, my brain went, "Hey, you probably shouldn't just be mixing chemicals all willy-nilly." So I pulled out my phone and Googled vinegar plus bleach, and I went into full panic mode when I read the results. Vinegar plus bleach equals toxic chlorine gas. I proceeded to panic and scream for everyone to get the heck out of the house. Be careful with chemicals, people. Yeah. Story 8. When I climbed my school's roof. I was quite a heavy kid and I was out and about with my cousin and mates. After running around school, my friends dared me to go up on the roof, and as I'm not a wuss, I gotta prove to them that I ain't afraid to go on no roof. So after a while and a lot of help, I got up, ran around up there and had a bit of fun, and then I had to get down. That's when I knew I screwed. Nothing in sight to help me. All I could do was either call someone to help me, e.g. parents or firemen, or jump. Decided to take the risk and jump, but to do parkour like I saw in videos, jump and roll, ended up messing my foot. Calling my parents and driving to the hospital when questioned said I slipped while playing basketball, but it's still messed up to this day, and my mom thinks it was because of basketball. Lol. That's what peer pressure does to you. Story 9. The other day I was barbecuing, not paying attention. I had a glove in my right hand that's oven safe. Someone handed me a beer and proceeded to talk to me. I took the beer with my right hand. I then opened the barbecue and grabbed the top grill with my left, unprotected. I had to adjust it, pulled it halfway out before the heat registered. Once it did, the realization was pretty instant. The blisters were bad for over a week. Story 10. I've told this story before. I had invited this guy over to my place for dinner after we'd been casually seeing each other for 3 weeks or so. Things were going pretty well. We were chatting, getting along like a house on fire, and he was helping me cook dinner when I started to feel extremely intestinally unwell. I've always been kind of a private pooper, and I could tell that this one wasn't going to be fun, so I asked him if he'd pop down to the shop at the end of the road to grab a bottle of wine for dinner. He agreed and toddled off down the street, and as soon as he was gone, I raced to the bathroom and relieved myself with something roughly akin to the force of picture a rocket launch, but in reverse. I took a minute to catch my breath, reached over to the toilet roll holder, and came back empty. Well, crap. No matter, I had a full 9-pack of toilet paper in the back room. I didn't have spare to keep it in my tiny bathroom. It was a very small apartment, so I usually just grabbed a roll or two, and he'd only just gone. And plenty of time. Cue to me 30 seconds later, pants around my ankles, awkwardly shimmying my way down the central hallway of my flat when I hear a still small voice from behind me. What are you doing? Turns out he'd managed to get to the shop and back in record time was sitting on my couch in my living room with a perfect view of my little burlesque. I was framed in the doorway like a gosh darn Renaissance painting. I felt like I was unintentionally giving him the most disastrously awkward welcome in the history of dating. It's very difficult to have a civilized dinner after that. Story 11. Director, driller, and locator of 10 years here. Drilling in Miami quite a few years ago and was doing a fairly deep road crossing. Half a rod under the road, I felt a pop and proceeded to see a 30-foot-tall crap stream shoot out of the road. I just drilled into a 12-inch unmarked force main sewer. If you have ever seen a 30-foot stream of raw sewage, you will never forget the smell. Story 12. New Year's Eve, 1999, I called a woman I was very good friends with. Friends only. I was firmly in the friend zone at the time. She was also my boss. I'd way too much to drink and was not in any way considered sober or even slightly so. I was angry as a fart. I proceeded to tell this woman how I felt about her, what I wished to do with her, and how I wanted to do it. I told her this for about 45 minutes. Afterwards, I continued to drink. Several days later, back at work, she called me to the office and asked me why I'd called her a New Year. I pulled a blank. I honestly could not remember a thing. She also informed me that several minutes into the conversation or monologue, she handed the phone over to her mother. I still pulled a blank. In fact, I was so convinced that nothing happened, I was sure she was winding me up. If anything like that had happened after all, why was she still even talking to me, let alone letting me continue to work with her? She insisted that I called and refused to believe her. It was not until late January when I received my detailed mobile phone bill that showed a 48-minute phone call to her number late on December 31st that I finally had to believe her. The difficult part was facing her mother after my boss and I became an item. We're now very happily married, but even now my mother-in-law still takes the anger out of me over that phone call. My wife, however, is very happy. Oh my gosh, does that actually work? I'm taking notes. Story 13. Here's a good one, which happened last week. I had a little too much beer and passed out at around 2 a.m. It was a couple of hours after I woke up and had this feeling of taking a crap, but at the same time I felt like retching up. As I ran towards the washroom, I thought definitely I'm gonna retch, but nothing came out. I was waiting on all four when I decided it's time to take a crap. Big freaking mistake. Halfway through, I realized I screwed up. Retch all over the floor. The worst part is I had to sit there 10 more minutes while I finished pooping. Disgusting. Story 14. I was a young software engineer working for a startup in 1998. I wrote about a week's worth of code, images and HTML. There was this funny file named $tilde in the directory. I wasn't sure how it got there, but I wanted it gone before I checked everything into CVS. No problem. Remove recursively ****. I discovered my error a few seconds later when the directory listing contained nothing. No code, images, or HTML. Turns out ** is a shell wildcard character matching any one character. Combined with **, all files got deleted. It was at this moment I knew I messed up. Luckily, I was using Linux. E2FS file systems had a utility called debugfs, which allowed me to list deleted inodes and dump them to new files. It took the better part of a day to figure it all out since this was before Google. I recovered the entire project. Well, that was close. Story 15. Halloween 2011. 3 men knock on the door all wearing masks. I laugh it off thinking it's some friends being stupid. I lock the door. Handle flies down. Door gets kicked open. Realize I'm messed up, and within seconds, I've got my hands and feet bound whilst they begin to trash and rob the place. I escaped when my feet got loose, slipped my hands over my skinny bag. Thank you, high metabolism. Ran to a window, opened it, climbed out, and jumped from the first floor window. Broke a ton and sprinted to a neighbor's house. I have messed up knees and feet and PTSD at Halloween time. Get anxiety when someone knocks on the door regardless of the time of the year. Got fixated in medicine for about 7 years and struggled with alcoholism. Also really freaking sad that my favorite holiday was ruined. Well, some people have a special place in hell. I wish they rot there. Story 16. Going on a long hike while in the Marines, I realized I messed up when I saw my first sergeant with 2 rifles and I just recognized I didn't know where mine was. What happened involved copious amounts of yelling. Since I didn't want to carry my rifle, my command figured I didn't have to carry any of my other gear either. I had to divvy up my pack among my squad mates and I rode in the truck the whole way back so I didn't hurt my precious feet, or something like that. My fellow Marine sorted me out real quick. I felt like the ultimate crap bird. Being stuck on duty in my service uniform for the next 24 hours yelling my general orders didn't help. Story 17. More years ago than I can quite believe. Until I caught a glimpse of my gray hair in the mirror was the last time I drove intoxicated. It was a summer lunchtime, and a handful of us had been partying for several days at a friend's parents' house. I was wasted, as was everyone else, so when a female friend turned up in a brand new 4x4 and promptly fell asleep, the obvious course of action was for us to borrow the vehicle for a joyride around the lanes of Somerset. This was actually pretty anomalous for us. Drink driving was always heavily frowned upon, but clearly under the influence of anything and everything, it all seemed to make perfect sense. For the next while, I was far too angry to know how much time was passing. We took turns speeding around the roads in what was effectively a stolen car, drinking and getting even more. My turn came last, and everyone was joking about our good fortune running out and us getting nicked or passing away in a fiery crash. Ha ha ha. Especially with me behind the wheel, as we were quite close to the spot where I'd been a passenger in a crash the previous year, which was thoroughly reassuring. I settled in and started tearing up the lanes. Can't remember what the vehicle was, but it was great fun to hoon around in, and a bit different. Automatics aren't especially common in the UK, and put on the Prodigy for the Ideal soundtrack. Turning the corner, I saw that we were at the start of a long straight, an old Roman road leading to Glastonbury. Ideal for just flooring it. So that's what I did. At the end of the straight, I made the turn with, I think, 2 wheels ever so slightly leaving the ground. I'll never forget the definitely discernible shift of mood that caused all of us, yeah, okay, that was a little close. It's time to stop this. Just before I saw flashing lights in my rearview mirror and my whole world got ready to go down the crapper. I had no idea how long they'd been behind us, but even if it was a very recent thing, they would just have seen us taking the last corner on 2 wheels. At God knows how much over the speed limit, in a stolen car, very intoxicated, very spiked, with no license, nor insurance, and pockets full of substances. Until then, I'd always thought my fluid turned to ice was nonsense, but at that instant, I understood. I really felt frozen. The car went immediately silent, apart from the siren, which we could now hear. As I stopped the stereo, trying not to panic, just thinking over and over, I'm screwed. This is it. I'm really, truly, totally screwed. And everyone else in the car thinking, he's screwed. Totally screwed. Thank God it's not me. There was nowhere to pull in for what felt like miles, so I had plenty of time to dwell on my imminent destruction and to weigh up the pros and cons of trying to escape them, which wouldn't have happened anyway in that car. Outwardly, I was totally dispassionate and calm, to the extent that later one of my friends said he decided I was either a psychopath or a Terminator. But internally, I was screaming, sobbing, and already trying to guess how many years inside I was looking at. Finally, I saw a place to pull in and put my indicator on, pulling back the hammer on my plan. I took a deep breath, made the turn, and the police car just steered wide and sped past us. The lights were to get us to pull over, sure, but only to get out of the way. They'd received a different call. I've never driven intoxicated again. Yep, consider yourself lucky, buddy. Story 18. Woke up in a small ditch in the side of a road. I hadn't slept and was making a long trip myself, thinking it was fine. I ended up nodding off at the wheel and woke up in a small ditch my car had gone into. Luckily, it was a small highway that was empty, so there wasn't anyone near me when I fell asleep. My car was also okay, as was I. But this whole thing could have ended very badly. People, please avoid driving when you're really tired. It's so dangerous. On par with driving intoxicated, in my opinion. Story 19. I play poker with a guy that wasn't as lucky. It was during the WSOP circuit event. No hotel rooms available, or were freaking $200+ if they were. He decided to drive back home. Fell asleep, went down an embankment, broke his back. No one would ever find him until it was too late. Had to crawl up that embankment with a broken back. He's paralyzed from the waist down. Unless they develop a robotic exoskeleton, he will never walk again. Story 20. So about 3 years ago, my dad's girlfriend, my brother and I went cycling around this lake like we do so often. My brother, 15 at the time, and I, 11 back then, decided to make a race with the finish being a parking lot. At the end of this parking lot was a barrier right before a bridge. It rained that day in the morning, and obviously my brother won by far, but I was still going at what for my age was a high speed. When I finally got to the finish, I had to slow down, but my bike just wouldn't. That's when I knew I messed up real bad. I ended up crashing into that barrier and hanging over that crap afterwards. My brother describes the story as so unbelievably funny because my bike was just small enough to fit under the barrier, so I drove on like 10 feet, leaving me behind hanging on the barrier. Well, I hope I made your day a bit better. Also, my English isn't perfect, I know. I'm not a native speaker. It was pretty good. Story 21. The year is 2015. A variety of mishaps affected my well-being that year, but this one was entirely my fault. The moment of realization was pretty strong, so it popped into my head on reading this thread. It's June. It's my birthday. Because of the messy year I'd had, my annual barbecue featured more guests than usual. Friends coming over in support, I suppose. My barbecue had been sitting in the garden for most of the winter, but I didn't think much of it. Gave it a clean and fired it up. There was plenty of gas in the canister, so I proceeded to cook enough meat to feed a small village. This went fairly well, and I was down to the last few sausages when I felt a warm sensation around my shins. "Hey, the Go Kid, what's happening there?" screamed my friend's wife. A moment or two later, I realized what was happening. There was a 3-foot flame protruding from the gas canister, like a mini flamethrower. The rubber seal had corroded from the time it had spent not being particularly well stored in the winter, and with the canister being heavily used, it had decided to go full Ellen Ripley on me. There were around 20 to 25 adults and 10 kids in a very small garden at this point, so I figured I needed to evacuate. We managed to get everyone out of the way, and I ran upstairs to get my tiny fire extinguisher. I exhausted the thing in the canister, but it was so hot the flames flared up again. Fortunately for me, my garden backed onto the fire brigade's premises, and within 2 to 3 minutes, the professionals were there and spraying all my food in foam. They were happy to take the canister away, saying it needed to be cooled for an hour or two, and they would do so while drinking a cup of tea. That was all fairly funny in hindsight, but it was soon overshadowed by what happened a few months later. Well, what happened a few months later? If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 22. So, my junior year of high school. I was taking a class called Sci-Fi and Fantasy. Predictably, we read books of said genre. We did readers' theater. Each person in the class gets assigned a character on a voluntary basis. Anytime the character says something, the assigned person would say it aloud. The teacher was the narrator, and roleplay was involved if he chose to. On a couple books, one being The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So in the chapter of the book, my character, Thorin, had maybe 1 or 2 lines, so I was bored. This was the chapter where eagles swooped down and saved the day from the orcs. As the group was saying goodbye, I forgot how the book actually goes in the part of the specifics. Please forgive me. For the eagles, my teacher stops and asks the group, "Anyone would like to do the eagle part?" Gazes around the entire class and does a double take at me. I'm a fairly outgoing person, especially in that class with role-playing, so I'm like, screw it, why not, right? And out of the silence, with zero warning to anyone, I just scream, "Caw!" and did the best eagle screech I could do. It was pretty spectacular, especially for being very much on a whim. Everyone stops and looks at each other. Now it's complete silence. Nobody knows what to do or how to react, so my teacher pipes up after 5 seconds of pure silence. "Okay, does anyone want to do the actual eagle part?" Apparently, they had actual lines where they said things. I physically cringed. Eagles don't say caw either, that's ravens. Story 23. I'm wearing beige-colored pants. I'm in the bathroom just before I'm supposed to have a 5-minute presentation. I pulled up my pants too quickly and accidentally whizzed some more. I get a huge stain on my beige pants that won't go unnoticed. Small panic attack in the bathroom. Eventually, I start making my way to the classroom because it's about to start. I walk through the crowded halls with a hand covering, probably looking like I have a limp or something. Not grabbing the whole thing, just having my hand there slightly in front. I get in class. I sit down. When I'm seated, I'm safe because the table covers the accident. I'm worried I'll get called up second to present, but no one calls me up. Instead, I just let people present and go up last when the stain is all dried up. Situation saved, but man, I was scared nonetheless. Presentations are frightening enough. Story 24. My brother and I went on holiday together in Tenerife and went to a water park on one of the days there. Please bear in mind, me and my brother are both 6'4" and quite stocky men. We were deciding on which ride we should go on first. I pointed out a ride that looked like a rapid ride, so he and I grabbed a double ring float and thought they were a bit small, but didn't think much of it. Got on this ride, and after 2 minutes, we thought it was very slow as the river was going at snail's pace. We also noticed that there were parents nearby, staring at us, looking like they were in disbelief. I looked around and realized the other floats just had kids on them. It was a freaking kids' ride. Got out the ride halfway through, however, had to walk past all the parents to get to adults' rides. Total screw up. Story 25. I clogged the toilet at my boyfriend's house. I was dog sick with a stomach bug and he was at work. The plunger was no help at all and there was no way a plumber could get there before he got home. I was in an absolute panic. There's no way in hell I was letting him see what I did in that toilet. It was the stuff of nightmares. I would have to move and change my name out of embarrassment and had been a witness to what I produced in that bathroom. I had no choice but to unclog it manually. It was not pretty. I'll never speak aloud of the things I did that day to keep my boyfriend from seeing my poop. Story 26. When I was 7, my parents left me and my sister, who was 10 at the time, home with a babysitter who lived 3 houses down. It was in the morning, and my sister had just woken up and wanted cereal, but had the last bit of milk. Being the petty person she is, she decided to eat the cereal dry, causing me to feel bad. So I went into the kitchen and put cocoa powder in the plastic cup, no liquid mixed with the powder, and I placed the cup in the microwave for 15 minutes, hoping to melt the cocoa powder so my sister could put it on top of her cereal. As if on cue, my babysitter left to go grab something from her house and left my sister in charge. Fast forward 5 to 7 minutes, and the whole kitchen was full of smoke. The cup was on fire, and the fire alarm was blaring off the roof. And I was crying Niagara Falls. I knew I'd messed up big time. My sister attempted to solve the situation by telling me to fan the fire alarm with the cloth as she opened the windows and dashed water into the microwave. Note that the fire was small, but was big enough for water to not be able to extinguish it. Enter my babysitter, who was now dumbfounded as to how I was able to set the microwave on fire during her 6-minute absence. She then called the fire brigade and my parents to alert them of the fire. Let's just say my parents didn't take it so well, but on the plus side, a firefighter correctly melted some of the cocoa powder from my sister before my parents arrived, always crawling down from laughter. Story 27. First mistake, Tijuana. Naive to substances, I followed friends who bought some in a shady bar via the server. Mistake 2. Trusting that. The dealer directed us to a bathroom stall. Mistake 3. Doing stuff on a dirty toilet. This repeated. Mistake 4. Feeling invincible. We hit clubs, ending at a packed club. Feeling great, I volunteered on stage, surrounded by women, spiked and intoxicated. I was loving it, until they handcuffed me to a pole. Surprise, then came the shock. A usually respectable member looked microscopic. Blame the cold, nerves, or the weird effects. Humiliation ensued. Beautiful women tried to tease my mini-me for an eternity. The club roared with laughter. One even slid a giant toy between my legs. My friends' view? Hilarious. My view? Mortifying. Masked by a forced smile. The grand finale. A nice water dousing. Handcuffs off. I dressed and returned to my teary-eyed, snickering friends. The shame's gone now. They call me a little peepee. Lesson learned, Tijuana and I have a complicated history, but that's another story. Story 28. When I was a kid, my sister and I would play together on the computer. The computer chair we had was a nice old armchair, and whoever was spectating would sit up on the back of the chair. One time she stood up without letting me know, and gravity being what it is, I ended up falling backwards and landing directly on the back of my head, requiring 12 stitches. I just remember the whole way down thinking, what did we think was going to happen? I obviously had a concussion, and I remember being super dazed, laying in a puddle, and my mom came in and gave me an annoyed sigh and said, "Come on, let's go to the hospital." Story 29. As a kid in elementary school, the moment I fell off some playground equipment and immediately lost all feeling in my arm. I was walking at a divider that separated the mulch from the grass like a balance beam while wearing a jacket over my face so I was totally blind. Lost my footing. Went down and tried to break the fall with my right elbow. Broke both the fall and my arm. Paramedics had to cut my jacket to get me out while the school staff tried to corral all the kids away from me. Q6 months in a cast, having to be bathed by my parents and without my favorite Scooby-Doo jacket. Story 30. At my last job, we had hired a fresh-out-of-prison man who scared the heck out of me. 6'7"-ish, probably 250 pounds of just straight muscle, bald, tattoos in the neck, the whole 9 yards. Just so you get a picture. Anyways, after 20 years in prison, the first thing he did was get a job and start financing a car. His first car ever. It was a nice brand new Hyundai. I was told to train him in sales, so we were about to set off for the day. He was parked to my right, and I went to pull out and heard an awful metal crushing sound. I immediately stopped and looked in my mirror to see his car door completely ripped off. His door was open as I was pulling out, and it caught my rear bumper. I drive a Jeep, and the rear bumper sticks out just past my rear tire. I was thinking, should I call my insurance or call my wife and tell her I love her before I pass away? I got out and got ready to get beat when he started yelling, "Sorry, man." This man felt awful that he messed up my bumper when his new car had the door ripped off. It was only hanging on by the bottom hinge. He told the insurance lady, "I don't want no cops coming here. I just want to get my car fixed and go on my way. I don't want my boy getting in trouble either. He's a good guy." He didn't understand how the process worked. He kept calling the insurance lady baby and me a good guy. I thought when the lady said I have up to $25,000 of coverage, that I was going to give him $25,000. He kept saying no, that he just needed enough to fix his car. It took him a little while to understand, but I stayed patient because I understood the circumstance. At the end of it all, he ended up being one of the nicest guys I'd ever known and spoke so highly of me to my boss and peers. He absolutely made me change my perspective on judging people. Super great guy. We still talk after I leave the job, and that was my, "oh, I messed up" moment. Turned out all right, though. Aw, that's actually pretty wholesome. Story 31. I lived in Israel a few years ago. I was participating in a seminar where the Israelis were hosting non-Israelis for Shabbat. I'm American, from Friday night into Saturday afternoon. That Sunday was going to be Yom HaZikaron, which is Memorial Day over there. Unlike in the US, where Memorial Day means cookouts, traveling, and shopping in general, Israel's Memorial Day is much more sad since essentially everyone knows someone who was ended in the army or a terror attack. When I left my host's house and was saying goodbye to his mom, I said, "Have a great Memorial Day." I then covered my mouth and shook my head and said, "Sorry, it's different in America." The mom said it was fine and was aware of how different our Memorial Day is, but I felt like an idiot. There are so many cultural differences between Israelis and Americans. If only we had more of these conversations. Story 32. When a friend asked me for a lift into town, we set off, catching up on people we knew and had seen recently, and I noticed a car closing in behind me. I looked again. It was the police. He turned his lights on and waved his hand for me to pull over. My car had been pulled over quite a lot, but I was legal, so it was just an annoyance. As I was about to comply, my friend said, "Crap," over and over again. I asked him what was up. That's when he opened his bag. Inside were 2 large packs. One, from what I could tell, was a large amount of substances, and the other, he then told me contained 3 ounces of substances. If it wasn't for the panic of what was in the bag and the position he put me in, I would have hurt him there and then. I had no choice but to run. If I pulled over, I would get 10 years apiece for that amount. By the time I hit the unlit section of the dual carriageway, I had another police car behind me. I told him to throw it out the window. That's when I found out he was running it for his uncle. It wasn't even his. After fully shouting at him, he dumped both packs into the undergrowth without being seen. About 5 miles later, I was forced off the carriageway. I was going far too fast for the bend, lost control, and slammed into a wall. The police dragged me out of the car window and set about hurting me. They put me in hospital with wounds that took well over a month to heal. I had a police guard until the hospital discharged me. Then I was charged. My girlfriend at the time went ballistic and finished with me. When I tried to get bail, they rang her to confirm I lived there. She said I couldn't come back, which left me without a fixed abode, so I was remanded into custody. End result, prison for me, and my friend walked away without any charges. Story 33. Me and a friend of mine got intoxicated after our football soccer team won the domestic league for the first time since 1985. We were in the stadium when we started getting intoxicated, and after the trophy ceremony, we headed to a famous landmark in my city where a lot of fans were celebrating. It's a tradition to celebrate there after a success. He couldn't drive as he was way more intoxicated than me, so we went on foot. It wasn't easy getting there as a lot of fans were on the streets, around 60,000. When we got there, we celebrated until daylight. Then after the party ended, we stopped a car because we thought it was a taxi, and we told him where we wanted to go. Then I realized it was a cop car. We paid a big fine and were then released, but I nearly had a freaking heart attack. Lesson learned, always call a cab when intoxicated and not look out for it. Story 34. I'm bisexual and I have a crush on my friend. Sadly, she's straight and apparently has a crush herself. I found this out just last night. Anyway, since I can't always keep things to myself, I decided to tell a couple of other friends just in case I needed to go to them for advice. This one friend, we'll call her Izzy, is in my math and gym class, which we both have with my crush. I told her during gym and she promised to not tell anybody. She lied. She ended up telling my crush on Lipsy, an anonymous messaging app. Luckily, my crush hasn't confronted me about it yet, so we're good, but she probably will during class tomorrow, so wish me luck. My crush is in my homeroom, gym class, LA classes, science class, and math class. I also sit with her and my friend during lunch, so yay. Story 35. Did too many substances at once and had a really freaky experience. I felt like I had just been spawned into this world and had no idea who I was or where I was. In just a second or two, all of it just hit me like a brick wall. I remembered my name, my age, and that I just dropped out of university. I remembered that I was in my bed in my room and where my apartment was located. I remembered that I was unemployed, messing up my life, taking loans to pay for substances, and just being on a totally wrong direction in life. My hands were completely numb. They felt like big balloons full of TV static, and it felt like I was a spirit moving my spirit arms, and then the physical body would slowly, with delay, move its arms in that same general direction as well. Everything went in slow motion. When I would move my hand, I could see several instances or images of my hand from the starting position to where my hand was currently. And if I threw something into the air, I could almost just lie there and watch it hang in the air for a while before slowly and gracefully moving down towards my bed again. For 2 entire days, I could feel the delay in my movements, and my hands just felt foreign. I felt like my hands were way too big and hollow and had no nerves in them. Oh yeah, I accidentally almost ended it all while I was spiked. That's when I got really scared and made an appointment with my doctor. Still, to this day, a month or 2 later, can't shake a feeling that my hands and arms feel a bit weird. Story 36. This one comes from my mom. She was working as a housekeeper in Manhattan at the time and got off the train with a bad stomachache and felt like loose bowel was going to happen. She wasn't too far from her boss's building, so she figured she'd go there. She goes, but he hasn't left his house yet and was using the bathroom. At this point, it's damn near impossible to hold in this atomic bomb, but luckily she had another boss living in the same building, and since she had his key, she went in and ran to the bathroom. She turned on the light, changed out of her clothes, and sat down. She forgot one step and didn't open the toilet lid. She sat down on it and had explosives all over herself and it sprayed across the whole bathroom. She had extra work that day. Story 37. It was the final day before I had to send off my folio for the Glasgow School of Art. The course was painting and printmaking. I had already applied to 2 other schools for illustration, which is what I really wanted to do, but I wanted to apply here to ensure that I had a backup. I was uploading all the photos that were relevant to the course when I realized that I only had, at most, a quarter of the required photos. All of the others I had were geared towards illustration. I had an hour left to somehow crap out at least 15 other paintings, take their photos in good lighting, edit them to reduce the file sizes, and upload them. I'm screwed. I said in a blank voice. I want to clarify, at that point, one school had already rejected me. My art skills at this point were freaking terrible, and the other school's class list was full. I eventually got into a nice college, but the fear I felt at this point was immense. I never really screwed up this badly before. Story 38. I was in high school and we had a few classes that were chosen to go to Veterans Day, I think, or something similar type event in the school auditorium. Not all classes went because it was not big enough, or maybe they had multiple time slots. I don't know. Either way. Anyways, it was very moving and a lot of people were starting to tear up and cry. I too was really feeling it as I was hitting home. I was about to cry and noticed that I was doing something and it threw me off. That I went from being present at the ceremony to an incredulous and wow moment in my head. It turns out I was smiling. Reason being is that my mom would yell at me a lot in an ugly way, and I had trained myself to the point that I subconsciously smiled in a time of sadness. It was a whoosh. Story 39. So I was texted by someone. Happy birthday, you fat mother trucker. I had a new phone and didn't know SIM contacts were a thing. I was going through a rocky breakup and I mistakenly thought this was my former girl's best friend. She would give me crap on occasion. I'll just call the ex's BFF K. Asked my girlfriend what K's number was. I deleted the previous text and was just upset at what she had said. She didn't know me well enough to send me stuff like that. I had indeed gained a lot of weight in just a few months. While I appreciated she had my girl's back while we were breaking up, this seemed like a real crappy personal attack. Texted back some very angry responses. She texted back a supremely justified what the heck response. It wasn't her that texted me originally. It was an old friend who was giving me crap for my weight gain, which is why I recognized the number. I was a paranoid schmuck, and I still kind of am, but I try to be more self-aware about it at least. Story 40. At the end of a meeting with the company president, my department director and project manager and I got caught up joking around and told the company president that I don't greet my director with a good morning, but instead a hearty screw you. The president of the company looked nervously around like he was trying to decide how quickly to fire me. Luckily for me, the director is the cool guy who doesn't get offended, and he deflected my screw-up onto him as he laughed and called me a witch.
This was a few months ago, and nothing came of it probably, because it should be a huge pain in the bum to rehire 2 positions. I've since learned to keep the joking to a minimum around upper management.
What was your, oh crap, I'm the bad guy, moment? So I was driving my car into a roundabout, doing nothing wrong, not cutting up any other drivers, driving at a safe, slow speed, and suddenly honk from another driver. I look up and there's a taxi about to join the roundabout and the driver staring straight at me. For Christ's sake, I think. These guys think they own the road. Now, you're not even allowed to enter the roundabout when they want to. In my own defense, I was having a bad day, so I did something I would never normally do. I slowed my car down to a crawl and gave him the finger, maintaining eye contact for several seconds, turning to look over my shoulder at him so as to keep up the finger and the eye contact for as long as possible. The look of astonishment in his face at getting the finger from this respectably dressed woman was priceless. As I exited the roundabout, honk. Again, but this time I realized the sound had been from a commercial playing on the car radio. It must be tough, being a taxi driver. Can't stop laughing, imagining this taxi driver wondering what he did to deserve it. Story 2. So when I was a neckbeard loser, I tried asking out this girl. She was hot, but she was also in a wheelchair. I remember thinking how awesome it would be asking her out since I figured not too many dudes would put up with a woman in a wheelchair. She would be just so thankful for me because I'm such a good guy to look past her insecurities. So of course I asked her out and she rejected me. At first I was mad. I couldn't believe a lady in a wheelchair wouldn't go out with me. Like, who did she think she was? She couldn't even walk. But then I realized I was being a schmuck. I thought her being in a wheelchair would bring her down to my level, but the truth was, she was still an awesome person that shouldn't be taking scraps just because she couldn't walk. I was the condescending schmuck who was looking down on her. It was a wake-up call for myself and how I thought of women. It wasn't easy. I had to do some self-reflecting, found out I had no good qualities any lady wanted to date, and had to work on myself. I'm not perfect. I still catch myself in toxic thoughts, but I'd like to think I've improved. Got a wife and she seems happy, so there's that at least. Story 3. I was in Tijuana drinking it up, and this was in the 90s. I left the bar, and when I made it outside, I realized that I left my wallet on the table. I went back in and saw that different people were there and no wallet. I asked them if they found a wallet, and all said no. I got more aggressive with them and started to threaten them if they didn't return the wallet. I was a big guy in those days, and I could tell they were scared. By this time, the bouncer was noticing, and I recognized that I'd likely get thrown out soon. So I told them that I'd be waiting for them outside and would punish them. I went outside and was looking in to scare them, and plus, I was mad. I then reached in my shirt pocket because I felt something there. Sure enough, my wallet was in there. Felt like a schmuck and still feel like a schmuck when I think of it. Story 4. In middle and high school, I was a sort of proto-incel, before that was even really a thing. Mid to late 1990s. I'd never had a girlfriend and was convinced that there was some kind of conspiracy because girls didn't like me. I was super attracted to this one girl in particular, but in true incel fashion, I never actually spoke to her. I simply got more and more frustrated over time. Let's call her Kara. Anyway, out of the blue, one day, her less attractive best friend and I struck up a conversation. I saw it as an opportunity. Let's call her Tina. Tina and I developed a legitimate relationship, but in my mind, it would always end up with Kara eventually. Tina was obviously head over heels for me, but I just used her to stay close to Kara. At some point in all this, Kara did eventually get a boyfriend, and I was crushed. I was so angry. I broke up with Tina, shortly after Valentine's Day, no less. It wasn't until a few months later when I was cleaning out all the notes Tina had sent me that I realized what a massive schmuck I had been. Tina went on to find a much better man than myself, and I learned some valuable lessons. I'm grateful too, because that incident made me reevaluate myself and my approach to women. There is an alternate universe where I'm single and on Reddit, complaining about Stacy instead of treating women like actual people, not just trophies to be won. Story 5. When I asked my mom to put me up for adoption, I was around 6. I realized how crappy that was when I was 22. I still regret it to this day. My father promised something some time before, and I asked about it. He denied ever making that promise, so I pushed on and said that he did. He got mad at me for insinuating that he was a liar and smacked me across the face. He then kind of forced me to go to the backyard and pick any bamboo stick from the hedge. This is the usual form of punishment. I had to come back with it and give it to him and lie down on the floor, face down and give him a number depending on the severity of my transgressions, usually 3+. The next thing is kinda obvious. I remember that I felt so unfairly treated that I went to my mom so she could comfort me, and that's where I kind of begged her to put me up for adoption. I didn't really mean that I didn't want my mom in my life, I just wanted to get away from my dad. They divorced while I was in boarding school, around 14. I lived with my mom, and she and I have never been happier. She is without a doubt my best friend. By the way, Asian household. Story 6. I was part of a night raid in Afghanistan, and the targets we were seeking left the site just before we got there. We blew the gate and found that all the adults were gone, but had left their kids behind. Our standard operating procedure was to leave one soldier in each room as we initially cleared our way through the compound, which allowed us to move fast, but I get surprised later if someone popped out of a hidey hole or something. That particular night, I was stationed in this room with 2 little kids, probably 4 and 6. There was a little light, but not much. They were understandably crying and being really loud, and I felt bad for them. I used to carry extra food in my leg pocket and fished out some cookies and tried to hand them to the kids. The way they freaked out when I reached toward them, I thought those kids were going to succeed in climbing straight up the wall. The screaming was out of this world. Only then did I consider that I could see clearly because of my night vision devices, but to them I was just a large, scary-looking monster in the dark, with antennas and glowing green eyes and balaclava with all sorts of crazy stuff mounted on my head and covered in gear. While I knew these were cookies in a foil packet, it probably didn't look like anything they would identify as food. It occurred to me that those kids would. Story 7. This goes back to my first real girlfriend when we were 15. We were on and off for 3 years all throughout high school. She'd had a reputation for being crazy because she'd heard a boyfriend she had before me. All the bros warned me not to date her. I did anyway. But in true teenage fashion, we went through periods where I would hide our relationship because she was crazy and I didn't want to have a public relationship with her. In retrospect, she was an absolute sweetheart. Any crazy behavior from her was absolutely a reaction to how guys treated her, 100%, including me. She was a catch. I was an utter peanut butter and schmuck sandwich to her. I still feel bad about it. We're still casual acquaintances today, but I really don't know how to apologize for how I acted 20 years ago. I feel like the statute of limitations has expired and it would be super awkward now. Story 8. Wasn't paying attention while driving and blew through a red light yesterday. Flipped an SUV. Airbags didn't even deploy. No one was hurt. Already accepted that I was an idiot. And then I see the occupants of the other car tending to the baby girl in the back seat. I've never felt so lucky and hollow in my life. I could have ended a baby or her father on Father's Day. Thankfully, no one is hurt at all. Thankfully, they had everything to keep their child safe from idiots like me. They were surprisingly calm about it. I won't be driving for a while, and when I do, it's grandma driving for me. I hope they forgive me. Story 9. This is mild in comparison to some of these, but my boyfriend and I were studying at the library during exam time, and he got up to go to the coffee shop to get a drink and a donut. He sat back down and ate his donut over the span of a couple of minutes, and I just sat there and waited for him to offer me a piece, the way I would certainly offer him one. It didn't, and it was done, and I got pretty annoyed with him and what I perceived to be a lack of generosity or kindness. I sulked about it, and it caused a small argument, and I only realized I messed up when I told my therapist about the situation, and she just asked, "And how did you expect him to know you wanted any of his donuts?" Story 10. I was in England one time, watching some sort of dressage horse thing with my family, and I was super bored. We were surrounded by people, standing up on a rise with a stone wall as a railing in front of us and very tiny gravel under our feet. Being bored and with nothing better to do, I tried to make some little ramparts on top of the wall with the tiny gravel, and I swiftly had a little fort growing on top of the wall. The stones in the wall I was building on were perfectly flat, though, and gravel wasn't very uniform either, so I lost some of the little stones over the edge while I was at building. I'd lose 1 or 2 at a time, here and there, but I didn't think anything of it. I didn't mind because there wasn't anyone down there and I had plenty of gravel up where I was. What was the loss of 1 or 2 rocks when I had access to thousands of tiny bricks in my little fort? I lost several at one go when I accidentally knocked over a section of my wall, and I finally climbed up to peek over the edge of the retaining wall to see where the pebbles went. And I immediately found myself staring down at the piercing eyes of fully bald and incredibly irate Englishman. Oops. Now I knew where the little rocks had gone. He glared up at me, yelled something, and started heading up around the hill to where our section was, plowing through a crowd of people that I had no idea had been down there. I managed to collect my parents and got us out of there just as the guy came boiling up around the hill. I thought he was going to end me, but he got away safely. Somewhere out there, there's an old bald man that just wanted to see the horse and carriage event and found his experience disturbed by tiny pebbles randomly raining down on his head. I wish I could go back and apologize to him. It's a good thing those were just pebbles. Imagine if he'd been building a catapult. Story 11. Once while working as a line cook in a restaurant, a coworker said something to me. I don't remember what, but I do know it wasn't anything bad. And for pretty much no reason at all, I smacked him in the side of the face with a raw, marinated chicken breast. I don't know, I guess I thought it would be funny. Pretty much immediately, I realized I did not live in the Monty Python universe, and hitting people with raw chicken
especially for no reason, was generally a stupid thing to do. It sort of worked out, though. Karma came around a couple weeks later when, through a series of unlikely events, I ended up having an entire chocolate cake fall on my head. Still covered in chunks of cake and icing, I immediately sought out a coworker and asked him if we were even. He almost cried himself laughing, and we actually became work friends. Story 12. I sat at a table with a group of friends in junior high. There was always this kid who would join the table that nobody really liked, but kid somehow wormed himself in. When people would get up, he would always take something from their lunch and eat or drink it. He never failed. It finally angered the table off enough that one day a guy at the table brought a bar of X-Lax and slipped it into a Hershey's wrapper. I wasn't included in the plan, but I knew it was happening before the kid sat down. Sure enough, the plotter left the table and the disliked kid snagged the bar and took 3 quick massive bites out of it before tossing it back into the plotter's lunchbox. 13-year-old me thought it was justice served. 30-year-old me can't help but remember what this did to the kid. He ultimately ended up crapping himself in the hall before 5th period. He went to the office and crapped himself again in the main lobby. The office reeked for the rest of the school week. His reputation was completely gone. The kid was a running joke throughout the rest of the year and ultimately moved away, partially, I'm sure, because of the amount of attention he got from that incident. Kid was a schmuck for sure, but he didn't deserve that. I wish I at least would have discouraged him from eating it. Story 13. This past semester, my friends and I went to one of our favorite college bars. Of course, my overly intoxicated friend got into an argument with this boy and started crying, so I told her guy friends I'm taking her home. We walked around the corner of the bar and I heard someone running behind us and someone grabbing her shoulders. Me, being the protective mama bear friend, thinking it was either that guy or someone more sinister, turned and punched the person. Turns out it was one of our guy friends who wanted to walk us home and make sure we got there safe, and I'm a hyper-alert 5-foot, 100-pound female who's watched too many crime shows. Thankfully, he was intoxicated enough he didn't care about the pain, and I wasn't strong enough or coordinated enough at the time to do a lot of damage. And we all laugh about it now. Story 14. My ex had a long history with other guys when we met. She was 18 at the time. She was the kind of girl who hung out with people twice her age when she was 15. I was inexperienced with other girls at that point. I saw the other guys she'd been with almost every other day out in the streets. It was frequent, believe me. This really messed me up emotionally. I went on so many rants about her, calling her names. It felt justified at the time. I was constantly imagining all the photos other guys had of her and the stories that had been told about her. It didn't feel like she was truly mine. Her body didn't feel like a private, intimate thing anymore. I went on multiple angry rants fueled by jealousy. She eventually left me. It took me a couple of weeks to realize that I was complaining about her past. I was clearly the bad guy in that situation. Story 15. I created a game in 8th grade called Basketball Battleships. The rules are, you stay to your side of the basketball court, you need to kick the basketball up at least a 50-degree angle and try not to get hit. The game was originally for my friends and I to play out of sight of the teachers, but word got out about my new game and it spread like wildfire. There was a game between 28th graders and 37th graders. It was going smoothly. Until an 8th grader, let's call him John, joined the game. John went directly up to the team division line and kicked the ball almost at a 90-degree angle. It went up almost 2.5 stories before coming straight down in front of a 7th grader. The ball bounced back up and hit the kid. I realized at that moment I was the reason I got bango jobbed. There would be 2 more injuries later that week due to John's new tactic. I wasn't punished for making the game because only my friends knew I was the creator and they promised not to tell the teachers. The game was banned. You know, sometimes the best inventions are the ones that get quickly outlawed. Story 16. A few years ago, my auntie discovered that my mom and brother had created a Facebook group she wasn't in to discuss things in an online game, and she fell out with them because they didn't include her. I saw a post one of my cousins from her side of the family made about families being tight-knit, and in anger, I made a comment along the lines of, yeah, until they decide to fall out over a stupid online game with cartoon visuals. She messaged me on Facebook, saying she had removed it as her post had nothing to do with the family falling out, plus she didn't want to get involved. I kept having a go at her while she was working because, in my mind, by giving a non-committal response, she was defending her mom, who had been insulting those who had been playing the online game and causing a lot of grief for my mom and brother, which was the reason for her not being included in the group. It ended pretty badly. My cousin saying her partner was threatened to go around to my house and thump me, and one of my other cousins swearing down the phone at my mom. It led me to falling out with both cousins involved, and I haven't spoken to either of them in years. In hindsight, I realized I was wrong to be bugging her over it when she was supposed to be working, and I would definitely restrain myself from confronting someone like that now. I was definitely the bad guy in that scenario. Story 17. I was mistreated by a partner in a 3.5-year relationship many years ago. Not so long ago, it happened again. I spent 1.5 years in a near catatonic depression, and I didn't have a lot of control over my thoughts. This meant that I viewed my relationships with a certain amount of detachment, very detailed and very impersonal. I realized that I never truly healed from the first extended cruelty. In every relationship between those two instances, I was not well inside. I had a sort of unworkable triad of ideals. Number 1, over-idealization of love. Number 2, a high and fear response to deceit and dishonesty. And number 3, a state of mind where I was never truly myself. I was so erratic and demanding. I was unwilling to let go when I should have, due to point 1, and unable to forgive simple things and move on, due to point 2. Every encounter mattered more. Every lie felt like an attack. I tried to deal with this by removing point 2, the fear of deceit. However, I encountered some truly terrible things in the most recent relationship. The first time it damaged me, the last time it broke me. But at least now I see where the real damage originated. I was the bad guy in many ways, and all because I was both afraid and hopeful. Never at balance with myself. I'm at balance with myself now. Story 18. I ghosted several boys who were into me because I knew I was insane. As in, I spent 11 days in a psychiatric hospital, struggling with cruelty, psychotic delusions, and several mental health issues. I got close to them because I genuinely liked them and wanted honest relationships, but at 17 years old, I was so mentally unhealthy. I ghosted them because I knew I would become the crazy girlfriend if things continued. I should have told them the truth and focused on getting better, but I ghosted them because I was too much of a coward to admit that I was simply too unhealthy to maintain a healthy relationship, even though that's all I ever wanted. They probably think I didn't like them or that they weren't attractive enough. I hate that they think that. In reality, I wasn't good enough for the relationship at the time. I was simply too mentally unwell. Story 19. This was during my finals week. I went out to spoil myself at Chipotle. I was feeling very stressed and all around bad since sleep wasn't a thing. I can't pull into a lane to make it there because of other drivers, so I'm forced to make a U-turn at a light I've never done so at before. I get to the light and I'm sitting behind this woman for like 5 minutes, waiting for it to turn green, and it finally changes. The woman doesn't move. I immediately think that maybe she isn't paying attention, so I give her another 30 seconds or so. She still doesn't. I honk once, she ignores me. I honk again, she ignores me again. I honk one last time and flip her off. I hate myself. She turns around, points up, and says something I don't understand, but she was clearly upset. I leaned forward and saw there was a light that was red for left turns that I couldn't see. It was legitimately my first time road raging at somebody and not to myself, and it is legitimately my last. I cringe thinking about that moment. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 20. When I was younger, I was very passionate about playing soccer. One guy on my soccer team that I played with for years was so useless. Sometimes he literally stood in the corner on the other side of the pitch when we were defending. He arguably would have played better by playing with one less player. He was that bad. By all accounts, he was a nice guy, but I was pretty annoyed at him when we played. I went to the same school as him, but didn't really talk to him apart from practices and games. I had nothing against him apart from that he was a really bad player. We have some mutual friends, and a couple of years ago I met him at a party. He seemed a little surprised that I was nice to him and said something like, "I thought you hated me." Sort of as a joke, but I could tell he really thought it in some way. I never really thought I'd been rude to anyone in my childhood, and it bothered me quite a bit to hear that he thought I disliked him for years. When I thought about it, I could see why he thought that, considering most of the time I was yelling at him to defend, pass the ball, especially considering I was a bit vocal in the pitch at times, and I took winning very seriously. What's funny is that me and him were the only two guys that didn't get to the club with the other guys at a party since we couldn't fit in the taxis with the other guys. We ended up walking and talking together for hours since we couldn't get a taxi because it was New Year's Eve. Haven't met him since, though. Story 21. I like wordplay, poems, alliterations, and rhymes. In high school, this girl would always ask to hear my stuff and pressure me to perform. I have social anxiety, I'm introverted and experience paranoid delusions, schizotypal personality disorder, so I thought she wanted to mock me. I didn't consider that she might have liked me or wanted me to gain confidence. Anyways, I was getting annoyed with her. She was pestering me to do one about me for the class. My first thought was, your constant chatter, a buzzing drone, makes my patience wear so thin. I'd rather be alone than endure this endless din. So please, find another way to spend your time this very day. She slapped me and ran off crying. I remember thinking, maybe she'll leave me alone. And she did. My entire class year did. I'm lucky this was back in 2002. I have a crystal clear memory of this moment, and the regret is overwhelming. Normally, I jot down a pun or rhyme or whatever and forget it. There's no deceit. I'm just All right. When it comes to processing intentions and the delusions or whispers, they don't shut up. Now I know they're BS, annoying to hear nonstop, but I don't give them weight. I probably should have had counseling. We took things too lightly back then. I'm better now, thanks to knowing about my disorders, introspection, aging, and patient people. I was never the actually hurt someone type, but I had a lot of anger as a teenager. Story 22. I went to an all-boys boarding school. One day, I was let out of class early to run an errand for my teacher, which resulted in me being first in line for lunch. The door opened precisely at 12:30, and as I stood to walk in, one of my friends cut in front of me and hurt me in the jewels in one fluid motion. I doubled over in pain as everyone else filed past me, laughing. I was furious with him for a while, and later that night, I set a reminder on my phone calendar for 2 years in the future to get him back. 2 years passed, and of course, I had forgotten all about it. Suddenly, my phone went off, and it all came flooding back. The shame, the anger, the injustice. Bizarrely, my friend and I both had a free period and were hanging out, so I suggested we go and wait for lunch. I insisted he sit in front of me, and as soon as the door opened, I slammed my fist, yelling, "Payback, witch!" It turns out I hit him really, really hard. He crumpled to the ground and started wailing in pain. I tried to stammer out, "You did this 2 years ago. You had it coming." But watching him writhe in pain brought me no satisfaction. I just felt like a complete piece of crap. It ruined our friendship, and everyone who saw it happen rightly thought I was a complete freaking schmuck. Story 23. My dad and mom didn't have a great relationship, and my mom constantly complained about my dad in front of us. One of the big things was that he was so attached to my grandparents and that we lived with him. When I was 10 or so, I was at a party with some friends of my parents. Wanting to be cool with the adults at this party and just parroting what I heard my mom say, I said in front of my dad and his friends something along the lines of, "At least you don't want to be 50 years old and still living with your parents." I remember having this stupid grin on my face because I thought it was hilarious. I've never seen my dad angrier, and it was a good lesson in the difference between good-natured teasing and being a total schmuck. Incidentally, my parents finally got divorced and have a great friendship now. I never should have been married. Story 24. When I was younger, I was a pretty angry dude and luckily focused into boxing. I would spar about 4 times a week with amazing fighters, occasionally pros. I loved nothing more than when the new guy came to try sparring. You got midlife crisis guys, wanna-be tough college kids, athletes from other sports, and I'd be right there to welcome them to hell. Sometimes I couldn't believe it was legal right before the timer would start. I'm looking at these guys like, I can really do whatever I want? There was one kid who would cry before he had to fight me. This happened about 3 times before he quit. I wouldn't talk to anyone or look anyone in the eye or do any gym activities or social gatherings. I was just there, filled with hate, wanting to beat the brakes off everybody who did not share my personal hell. About 8 years later, I'm a completely different person. You'd never guess if you saw me. Story 25. When I was 8, my mother sat me down and told me her adult friend was coming over. She warned me that her friend was sad, so it was especially important that I stay out of the way and be courteous if I saw her. She explained simply that her friend really wanted kids, but that she just found out her body was made for adopting instead of giving birth, and she needed help accepting this. Her friend came and I decided to give her a hug and help cheer her up. I knew adoption was great and thought maybe I could help spread the love, so I chirped, "Hi, friend. When are you going to have some kids already?" She turned around and left, bawling her eyes out. I immediately knew I screwed up and sent myself to my room before my mom could say a word. A few decades later, though, she and her husband have 2 wonderful adopted children who are the lights of their lives. One is disabled, autistic, and no one could have been better for him than her. Her family is beautiful and perfect. Story 26. I was co-teaching a 4-day business seminar, and we had a student show up late, unbathed, and really out of it, as if he was out all night drinking. He also forgot his glasses, and he couldn't follow along on his laptop. My partner and I decided if he came in like that again, we were going to throw him out and withhold a big chunk of his tuition, as this was just not going to be tolerated. The next day he came in even rougher. He had slept in his car and hadn't even changed clothes. Before we could confront him, he started to apologize for his condition. It turns out his son had been robbed and terminated by a gang in Miami 2 days before, and despite that, he was worried that his tuition would be non-refundable and the classes were needed to keep his job. He was understandably so detached from reality that he hopped in his car and drove to Atlanta for his class. He called it an early day and took him home, got him a shower and a change of clothes, and tried to get a few bites of food in him. Let him know that the class could wait, and we would teach him privately if need be. Over the years, he has recovered and will always be one of the nicest, kindest, and most humble human beings that we'll ever know. The things we said after that first day still make me cringe 15 years later. Story 27. We had just moved into a new house, and our tiny, crappy $20 Weber grill disappeared out of our backyard. Now we just happened to look into our neighbor's yard through the fence and see a tiny Weber grill on their deck. So we go next door and knock and ask her neighbor if she's seen our grill. She didn't speak much English, so we tried to communicate that we thought they took her grill. She kept shrugging and saying to wait for her husband to get home. A few hours later, her husband knocks on her door, grill in hand. He says, "My wife said you need the grill? We just got the new one and don't need this anymore. You want it?" So we take it and immediately realize it isn't ours. It's like the tiny, decent $30 model. Not only did they not steal it from us, they gave us an upgrade. To this day, I'm not sure if the wife knew we were accusing them of stealing or if she just knew we were talking about a grill. They ended up being the nicest neighbors. They always brought us food and invited us over for parties, and we're just all around wonderful. Story 28. This kid who lived down the road from me was the target of nitpickings and just general high school cruelty from my friend group. I poked fun a couple times, but it didn't feel good, so I stopped. But I also just stood there while my friends kept at it. Ultimately, he ended it all. To this day, over 15 years later, I feel like it was my fault. Not in an unhealthy way or anything, but that shock of news made me realize the evil of being quiet and not intervening. I knew it felt wrong picking on him, and I should have stopped my friends, but I instead just stood by quietly. I remember the music playing at the funeral, and it really sinking in that indifference to evil or pestering is so wrong. I stand up to any and all pestering I see since then, and to this day. I strive to only be kind, even if it's by not being mean. When I see anyone who is down, I let them know they've got my shoulder whenever they want. And when people admit to any ideations, I don't leave their side until they have professional help. I don't tolerate jokes or any level of bullying, no matter who it's from. I was the bad guy back then, and I've accepted that. I use it as my foundation now to be kind enough to hopefully make up for it someday. Story 29. I always used to use the handicapped restroom stall because it was always so much more spacious and roomy. I don't have claustrophobia or anything, but I just preferred the larger stall. Then one day I had to use the restroom after watching a movie at the theater, so I did the usual and used the handicapped stall. The thing was, it never really crossed my mind as to why these stalls were bigger, as I'd never heard anyone refer to these as the handicapped stalls. So I was just doing my business when I heard a motorized wheelchair pull up to the stall. Then it all suddenly made sense. I was using the stall meant for handicapped people, and I was now the schmuck. Some guy asked the man in the wheelchair if he needed help, and the man says, "Nah, someone's in there," which pretty much confirmed if it wasn't already clear. I was preventing a disabled man from using the restroom. I wanted to stay in there forever and just curl up into a ball, but I couldn't keep anyone waiting. So I finished my business, walked outside the stall, and saw the man. The look on his face was so disappointed. I wanted so badly to apologize to him, but I couldn't even bring myself to let a single noise out of my mouth. I just looked at him for a second and then went and washed my hands. Ever since then, I've never used a handicapped stall again. Story 30. Okay, so I'm not sure if this counts, but I had dinner with a friend just a few days ago. All went well until I signaled for the bill and was told to go over to the cashier to pay. This we did, only to discover that there wasn't anyone there. So we waited and waited. Looking around, all the servers were busy serving, and the one whose attention I managed to catch said that regular servers weren't allowed to operate the cash register. Only managers could. I asked him to get said manager. He sat out, only for him to start taking the orders from another table. Walk into the kitchen and immediately out again to start taking another order. The guy had just forgotten we were standing there. Frustrated, I looked at my friend, pulled out my phone, and started timing. I waited till another 3 minutes had passed, then grabbed her and pulled her out of the restaurant. We'd just done a dine and dash. In my defense, it was literally more than 10 minutes since we'd started waiting, and there's probably no reason for someone to be kept waiting that long without even a word of explanation. So I might be the bad guy, but there were extenuating circumstances. Story 31. I used to work in a supermarket cafe when I was 15, 16. One day, as we were about to close down, me and my mate were messing about, throwing dishcloths at each other in the kitchen behind closed doors. After about 8 dishcloths flew and a few hits, my mate pings a dirty, horrible food-covered cloth at me, then went out into the cafe bay where a few customers were just finishing off their meals. I was raging. I ran out with another cloth tightly rolled and soaked for extra weight for a better throw, and with all my might, I launched it straight at his head. Well, he ducked at the last second, and I just watched it open up and slapped straight into an old lady's face who was just sitting and chatting to her friend. I could not apologize enough to her. I felt so stupid and irresponsible. Although she took it like a champ and said something along the lines of, "Boys will be boys," I gave her and her friend a free coffee and one of our fanciest buns each to give myself peace of mind. Story 32. Years ago when I was middle school and me and my sister were young, we played with kids on our street and my sister had a rock collection. Stupid kid grab. And one of the kids on our street would take the rocks she had collected and chuck them in the field we played in. Being the protective older brother I am, this made me mad, so I had to get some type of redemption. Previous day, they planted all types of cool flowers in their front yard, so I told the kid, "If you do it again, I'm stomping out your garden." And he had the audacity to say, "I don't care," and did it again. I destroyed 75% of the flowers, and shortly his dad came outside, and I already knew what I had been bamboozled into. He's obviously mad and yells in a worried tone, "We just got these plants yesterday. Why the hell did you do that?" I explained what it was over. He came to my house and told my mom, but she wasn't upset. Story 33. I was once playing in a D&D campaign where my character had a vendetta against a certain deity because he believed that they alone were responsible for the passing of one of his loved ones. He ended up seeking out an artificer or blacksmith that could create an item that would strip the deity of their immortality, leaving them mortal. This involved being sent on a fetch quest for crafting supplies. None of this, by the way, was told to the other players. All of it happened when the party was separated. Later on, we found out that the paladin in the group, who was amnesiac, might have worshipped the very same deity my character had a vendetta against. During that time, the other players also uncovered that there was a cult plotting to end this deity through a recurring NPC. The others in the party, realizing that ending this deity may warp the fabric of space-time, decided that they wanted to stop this cult. My character somehow convinced the party that gathering the crafting supplies would assist in stopping this cult. This eventually culminated in my character emotionally screwing the party and physically screwing the deity when the time came. My face when we had a conflict of interest that might have resulted in player passing. My face when I had a whole bunch of adventurers fetching goods for me to end them with. My face when I was the reason for the end of times. Story 34. I'm still not sure about this, but I had a few Russian housemates for a while and ended up having to charge one of them. The thing is, I escalated an argument about why 3 a.m. is not an acceptable time to bring guests into the house and continue a loud party. I should have simply said, "Oi, shut the hell up," and left it at that. Instead, it escalated, resulting in me hitting him hitting me back harder, a king hit, and a $5,000 fee from a hospital. I tried to charge that guy, taking advice from people who didn't actually have my best interests at heart. I didn't listen to his appeals to talk it out and resolve the situation like adults. I still sort of regret that. I reckon I escalated the situation with a guy who was already angry, got to a point where I just smacked him, then got angry because he hit me back harder. Then I made the mistake of going to a private instead of a public hospital, so I wanted him to cover the cost. Anyway, I think I might have been the bad guy there. It sucks. Story 35. I was seeing this girl whom I'm going to refer to as Jim for quite some time. This was the first serious relationship I'd been in since my last relationship, and I genuinely wanted it to work. However, a lot of things she was doing in the beginning reminded me of red flags I'd encountered in my previous relationship with my ex-girlfriend. I hesitated to officially define the relationship and have the "are we boyfriend and girlfriend" talk for a while. So while Jim was posting about me on social media and telling all her friends about me, I was still dating other people. Not sleeping with them, just casual dates. Still not cool. I was under the impression that she might be doing the same thing. During this time, I met another really cool girl. If you had asked me in grade 12 to describe my ideal partner, I probably would have described her perfectly. That was then. Now I realized a bit too late that I only saw counterpart girl as a friend. Due to my anxieties about relationships, I started behaving in a way that I'd always vowed to avoid, essentially becoming a bit of a player. Cue Obi-Wan voice. I really liked Jim and I wanted this to work out. I eventually had the "are we exclusive" conversation with Jim, and also had the "let's just be friends" conversation with counterpart girl. However, this came after a long period where I was essentially being a schmuck, even if I was justified in my suspicions about Jim. Looking back, I think I'd rather have the peace of mind knowing I didn't compromise my morals, even if it meant potential heartbreak.
What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in with a stranger? I worked security in an aquatic theme park and was watching Jeopardy in the employee entrance. One of the veterinarians came through and watched it with me for a bit. He said he watches it religiously and he passed the test for the show and was hoping to get selected. He'd heard that they like to have a diverse group of contestants, and they hadn't had a black guy for a while, so he liked his chances. A few days later, there were 2 black contestants. So when I see him leaving the next time, I say, "Hey, did you catch Jeopardy last week?" "No. Why?" He responds, "There were 2 black guys on it." I explained. He just stares at me blankly for a few seconds and walks off. That's when I realized that it was a different gentleman than I had the previous conversation with. Oh my god, bro, that is awkward. Jeez. Story 2. The most awkward moment of my life thus far was with a stranger. I was in Quebec Airport going through customs with my family. Because of some recent changes to their system, they didn't have everyone in a line, but instead in a large pen where they would release around 50 people at a time. Chaos. When my family is at the front, they release us, and everyone is running forward in a mass trying to get to the kiosks. Next to me is a tall Swedish man trying to get his family a kiosk. He's running forward and waving his arm behind him in a come-on motion, clearly frantic. Well, somehow the worlds aligned where his middle and pointed finger went perfectly into my 2 nose holes. Perfectly. As he then ripped his arm upward to motion his family forward, my nose was also ripped forward, and I noticed I was hurt right away. He looked at me in horror. My family looked at me in frustration as we needed to get to a kiosk. The customs agent looked at me in bewilderment. Language barriers made the situation all the more awkward. I would love to see that on video. Story 3. Woman at a gas station didn't know how to put air in her tires, so I helped her because I wanted to put air in my tires and didn't want to wait all day to do it. She called her husband on speakerphone to let him know she found some nice man to help her air her tires. Then I hear him call her an idiot and say that I'm only helping her because I want to sleep with her, and where does she get off talking to other men? She stammered and tried to explain, and nothing was going on between us. After she got off the phone, she looked at me as if her husband just caught her fooling with me and got in her car and left. No thank you, no nothing. And for some reason, I felt guilty for even helping her out. Jeez, I feel awkward just thinking about it. Story 4. At the airport, I walk up as the elevator door is closing and there's a woman inside with a stroller. I slowed down because I wasn't in a hurry and would rather catch the next one. And I saw a little girl, about 2 or 3, playing in a flower pot nearby. I realized she was likely meant to be on the elevator with her mom, but the doors are closed by the time I put it together. I walked up to her and said, "Did your mommy get in the elevator?" She just shyly smiles. I sat down with her and decided to wait in place for a few minutes for the mom to realize. A minute or 2 later, the man walks up and says, "Excuse me, can they have a child?" In a thick Russian-y accent. I was trying to decide what to ask to figure out if she was his kid. When the elevator door reopened and the woman came flying out, yelling for the girl, she hops up happily and runs over to the mom. I stared at the guy with an accusing look, then he turned and got in the elevator too. Don't know what the heck was going on there. Was he with them? Did he think I was trying to take their kid? Was he a creeper following them? So awkward. I literally sat silent through the whole weird encounter. Maybe that was her dad? Story 5. It was my first time voting in a presidential election in 2016 since becoming old enough to do so, and the polling place was at a library. When I got to the front of the line and started filling out the required papers, I mentioned it's my first time and what to do next. After hearing this, the woman who was working there and helping me raised her voice and said, "Hey everyone, we've got a first-time voter here." Started clapping so they all would clap as well. Nobody clapped. I was just standing there really embarrassed before quietly saying, "Can I just go vote now?" Story 6. My wife and I went out for a drink one night. We walk into the bar. I see someone I know at the bar with their back turned. Walk up behind them and tickle their sides. Turned out I didn't know this person. They just gave me a weird look and walked away. Got their spot at the bar, though. Well, you won at the end. Story 7. Fooled around with a guy in college and fell asleep in his dorm room. I woke up in the middle of the night needing to whiz so badly but unable to find any of my clothes right away. I ended up spending so long trying to find them in the dark that by the time I had enough to wear out in the hall to get to the bathroom, I didn't think I'd make it. He was still sleeping, so I grabbed a big reusable water bottle and squatted over it. It was blissful relief until I looked over and saw his roommate staring at me in horror. Was he also there when you guys were fooling around? Story 8. When I was a teenager, my friends and I would spend the weekend staying up late playing video games and eating junk food. I was also a cross-country runner, and on this particular night I was experiencing some extreme chafing from a long run earlier that day. While we were at the gas station getting Doritos and energy drinks, I announced who I thought was my friend. Man, my melons really hurt. Upon realizing it was a complete stranger with whom I had shared this intimate detail, I simply stared at him and said, "You're not my friend," and walked away. I didn't go back to the gas station for a long time. Story 9. I worked at Old Navy and some lady was looking at men's shirts and she stopped me and held up his shirt and asked if I thought it would fit her son. I looked around and no one else was around. We stood in silence for maybe 30 seconds before she started laughing and said, "Oh, you don't know my son. He lives in Michigan. We were in Washington State. Never mind me, I'm just spiked." And then she went on and bought the shirt. Dang, what was she on? Story 10. Was at a bar with some friends watching a basketball game and this guy kept asking me to check out his girlfriend every time she went away. For example, she got up to go outside to smoke. He stayed in and he was like, "Be honest, is that not the best bum you've ever seen?" I did this several times. I felt so uncomfortable. There's no nice way of putting it. She wasn't attractive whatsoever to me. I'm glad that guy's happy with her though. I was engaged at the time, which was another reason I didn't try to do anything. I'm Bosnian, but I've lived in the States since I was very young and this happened in Memphis, TN. I know this is a very similar plotline to Shallow Hal, but this actually happened. Unlike Shallow Hal, this woman wasn't really fat. She just looked like someone who had smoked for well over half her life. Story 11. At an art studio in LA. My girlfriend was wearing a denim jacket. As we looked at a piece together, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the jacket and I reached over to grab her bum. A sudden, "Oh!" comes from beside me, and a woman 30 years older than me is standing there blushing. I told her I thought she was someone else and ran away to my girlfriend. A few minutes later, the lady comes and finds us talking about young love and how cute we are while making too much eye contact with me. You just reignited her youth, bro. Story 12. That time I screamed at a woman over poo. My little village has a small annual dog show. We normally enter our little dog who has won friendliest dog, waggiest tail, and dog the judge would like to take home in the past. This year, she was unfortunately in season, so we didn't enter to prevent any fuss from the other dogs, but took her along to watch. Halfway across the park, she decided to poop, and I suddenly realized I'd forgotten a bag. There were loads of other people with dogs around due to the show, so I wandered away a little to ask someone for a bag. I turned back, and to my horror, a lady was picking up my little dog's mess. Not wanting to feel like one of those a-holes that don't clean up, I ran towards her to advise her she didn't have to do that because I was going to get it. Instead, in a sort of panic, I waved my arms and barked, "No, that's my poo!" Please note that I did not say, "That is my dog's poop." She physically jumped and turned a deep red. She sort of mumbled an apology, dropped the poo, and marched off with her dog. It was at that point that I looked to my left and saw my dog's poop sitting a few feet away from the lady's dog's mess that she was attempting to pick up. I think about this at night sometimes. I would too. Story 13. I tried to make some moves on a girl when I was in high school. We were in a 7-Eleven near the back, and because of the late hour, I figured we were alone. When she turned me down and left, I decided to drown my sorrows with a bag of Sour Patch Kids and physically ran into the older, bearded man who had been buying nuts. He gave me a sympathetic look and opened his mouth as if to say something, and I panicked. I said, "See you tomorrow," and left the store. I still think about this nightly. Story 14. I was with my mom buying flowers at a florist for a New Year's Eve party. The florist was obviously a very lonely woman and wouldn't stop going on about how she isn't doing anything for New Year's and how it's so nice to have friends to visit, to the point where it became really saddening. My mother obviously really felt for her. Every now and again, maybe twice a year, just brain fart and accidentally says what she's thinking. That day was one of those rare days. After paying for the flowers, my mom said, "Thanks, hope you find a friend soon." I look at her in shock. The woman looks at her in shock. My mom just gasps, apologizes, and literally backs out of the store. God, it was so awkward. I would have just combusted on the spot. Story 15. I used to do security work at parties. One night there was an alert call for a young woman gone missing. I found her with her dress hitched up looking for her garments in the bushes. I managed to unlock her phone to call her dad, who from his name I recognized as the district attorney. He comes over to pick up his intoxicated daughter. While I was carrying her to the car, she was making very inappropriate remarks about me carrying her, all the while her father was hearing me out like I was responsible for his daughter ending up that way, even suggesting I had essayed her. His lecture continued after I put his daughter in the backseat, still making the same remarks. When the cops arrived at the scene, I told the cops my side of the story. As soon as she picked up my name, she started screaming it to the point of waking up nearby neighbors. I was brought to the police station for interrogation. Surveillance footage proved my innocence. 5 years later, I see this district attorney on a weekly basis in my job. Story 16. Wife and I went to Europe for our honeymoon. We were in a train station in Amsterdam and I had to use the bathroom. I walked into the toilet stall and saw there was tissue paper in the bowl, but didn't think anything of it. I did my business, and when I tried to flush, it didn't go down. In a panic, I flushed again, and this only resulted in the water becoming dangerously close to the brim of the bowl. I said screw it and started to leave. However, right outside the stall was a bathroom attendant. He looked over at me and started yelling at me, asking why I was clogging up the toilet. He was blocking me from leaving, and all these other people in the bathroom looked in at us. God, it was so embarrassing. I wanted to go away. I eventually muttered sorry and brushed past him and ran out of the bathroom. Story 17. I serve in the Air Force, and one time I got injured at work and had to go to the hospital. Nothing serious, just dinged my finger super hard. Anyhow, when I get to the hospital, I walk in the front door. I'm still in uniform, and some nice older man comes up to me and thanks me for my service. I told him I appreciated his support, and then he abruptly asked me if I was married. I told him no, and right at that moment, he turned to this woman walking by, heading for the door. He turned to her and said something along the lines of, "You see this nice man? You should go on a date with him." At first, I thought maybe he knew the woman, maybe his daughter or something, but the shocked look on her face, I could easily tell he did not know her. She stopped for a moment, and he asked her again, and she just went wide-eyed, kind of stuttered for a moment, and then beelined it for the door. I really don't know what to say, so I just stood there looking like a guy who just got whacked in the head. The old man then turns back to me and says, "Let's see who else is here unavailable." At this point, I just made some excuse about being late for my appointment and walked away. I don't know if I've ever been so red before or again in my life. Yeah, sometimes old people put you in situations like that. Story 18. When I was 11, me and my brother went on a trip to London and spent a little time there with our parents. At the time, they used to work there. So I live in Romania and I used to never leave the house back then, so visiting London was like a big thing for me. Everything was so new and interesting, but at the same time intimidating, considering I was very shy and in a foreign country. Anyway, our parents take us to Madame Tussauds Museum. If you don't know, it's a wax museum with celebrities, superheroes, and other more. And I was baffled. Sculptures were very realistic and cool, and the whole tour I was amazed. So we finished checking out the first room, and right before entering a hallway leading to the next one, there are two sculptures of TV hosts or something similar. I was very intrigued by those because they looked more realistic than everything else before, and one of those hosts was smiling wide with an open mouth, and I was fascinated by his teeth for whatever reason, so I knew I wasn't allowed to touch anything, but I slowly moved my finger to his teeth, and right before I almost touched them, boom, he says hello to me. It literally scared the crap out of the 11-year-old awkward shy kid I was back then. It turns out they were real people who pranked innocents. After the scare, I felt so awkward. Probably the most awkward ever until that day. It's not really that big of a thing, but I really wanted to share. Story 19. Went out for a car ride once, looking for things to take photos of, and came to this quiet little lake. I got out and walked through this little wooded area where there was an older man, maybe 60s. Things started out okay. He asked me what camera I had, and I told him and why I'm out, etc. Harmless. Then he asked if I were alone. I said it wasn't. That didn't stop him from fiddling in front of me and pushing to know more about me, if I were single, etc., and where I was from, but doing so like it was all so normal. As you can imagine, this freaked me the absolute crap out. He followed me, and as I tried to get out of the conversation, he kept insisting, looking at me funny, getting a little close for comfort. I told him I had to go, and he insisted on walking me to the car even though he knew I had someone in there waiting for me. It took me a while to push the whole ordeal out of my head. Call the cops, mate. Story 20. Worked at a hotel front desk, third shift, and an old, maybe 75-plus lady called the front desk and wanted a pillow delivered to her room. I took the pillow. When I got there, she wanted me to come inside. I'm like, no, here's your pillow. She insisted, so I did. I get inside and she shuts the door and tells me to put the pillow on the bed. She then goes to a drawer in her dresser. At this time, I'm like, I need to return to the front desk, thinking the worst. She then pulls out a thing of Band-Aids and wants me to put Band-Aids in her open sores on her feet. I noped out in there as fast as I could and left before she came down for morning breakfast. Still freaks me out. Yuck. Story 21. When I was in college, I was waiting for a shuttle bus, and a girl I had previously been in class with walked up to the stop with a guy I didn't know. I say hi, how are you? And we have a short exchange of pleasantries. And then she turns to the guy next to her and in sign language says, I don't remember her name. So I sign, that's okay, I don't remember your name either, and offer my hand to the guy with her and introduce myself. Now that's just absolutely hilarious. Story 22. I worked at the entrance gate for a theme park, where season pass holders use a biometric scan of their right index finger to verify their identity. One day, a little girl walks up with her family, only spoke Spanish. Scans her pass and places her left finger on the scanner. I say, can you use your right finger, sweetie? Then her mother raises the girl's arm to show me she doesn't actually have a right hand. Seemed to be due to a birth defect rather than a horrific accident. However, her left finger keeps getting rejected, so I call a lead over to override the old scan and redo it. It then proceeds to say the same thing to the girl, followed by her mother raising the arm again. It was definitely more awkward for me than the family, but it got worse. But 3 months later, it happened again. The same little girl. Absolutely mortifying. Story 23. Me and four of my mates were pre-drinking in my house prior to heading out clubbing for $1 Corona Thursdays. We were all uni students and we're all pretty much broke, so when the topic came up as to how we were going to get to the clubs, I suggested that we walk there as it was only a 30-minute stumble and we could take road beers. Everyone except for one of my mates, which we will call Ben, was cool with walking. Ben did not want to walk and suggested that we take a cab, but we quickly ruled this out as cabs were expensive where I'm from and Ben had no money to chip in anyway. After some back and forth arguing, I proposed to Ben that I had a bag that was full of 40+ worth of coins in the condition that he pays with that. Otherwise, we walk. He insisted on doing this. 30 minutes later, we all hopped in the cab to head to the clubs. I was in the very back of the cab while my friends were in front of me with Ben in the middle. It was one of those situations where I would need to wait for everyone in front of me to get out before I could put the seat forward and hop out. It quickly felt terrible, as sometimes you get some cab drivers or schmucks, but this dude was the complete opposite. When we arrived, the cabbie driver said that it would be $26.50. My friends bailed out of the cab as fast as they could, but luckily Ben kept his word and gave the cabbie the bag of coins while I was trapped in the back waiting for Ben to get out. The cabbie turns back and angrily says, "Are you freaking serious?" Ben nervously explains that's all we had and that there's around $40 in there, but the cabbie was not happy. He said, "I'm not freaking happy, boys. Get the heck out of my car and next time just freaking walk." They said my friends outside whizzing themselves laughing. Then got out and didn't help me get out, and I spent 30 seconds awkwardly trying to get the seat to go down. Well, the cabbie said, "Hurry the heck up," with me just apologizing. It was so awkward. Feel bad, but to be fair, he got a decent tip as we stopped counting at $40. What would you do in that situation? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 24. Once I was at a dog groomer to pick up my dog. It's fairly small, 20 pounds, and white. Usually when I take him, he's got long semi-curly hair, and when I pick him up, he has short, straight hair, which is quite a change, and this is what I expect when I go to pick him up. I walk up to the counter and request my dog, and the clerk tells me he'll be out in a moment. 30 seconds later, an attendant walks out to the lobby from the back door with a dog that immediately gets excited and tries to run away as soon as it rounds the corner to me. "Hey, buddy," say as I walk up and attempt to pick up my dog, but it turns around and starts recoiling back and gives me a nip as I try to pick him up. An old man behind me asks, "Hey, is that your dog?" And me, thinking it's a pretty weird question, to respond, "Yep." At that point, he goes, "I don't think so, mister. That's my dog." And as I turn and realize this dog that looks just like mine after grooming is 100% not my dog, my face goes completely red and the whole lobby starts laughing. To make it worse, the old couple whose dog it was stuck around just because they wanted to see what my dog actually looked like, and of course, when he came out with a different haircut, there was only a vague resemblance. Yikes. Story 25. Bit late to the party with this, but while my dad was out of the country, there was a major leak from the water tank in the loft, which caused serious damage to the property and caused lots of other issues, including a hole in the ceiling. I called out a repair guy only to hear a huge boom, followed by a string of expletives before he called for help. Found him half in a cupboard, soaking wet, with his hand in a burst water pipe. I ended up having to help. This involved me climbing to the loft in a short dress and stockings while he was basically laid on the floor underneath the ladder, and trying to turn off the water from there. This didn't work, so we ended up switching places so he could professionally investigate. Swapping places involved me getting soaking wet and having to press up against the guy and control myself into position in order to minimize the risk of further damage and water explosively spraying everywhere. There was further pressing against each other and awkwardly closer contortions, as water was sprouting out like from a fountain unless we held it before the leak was resolved. The situation was like a bad corn parody. Our dialogue even included things like, "If you come here, you'll get wet, and I don't mind getting wet, let's do it." My friends now refer to this as my plumber corn story. Story 26. I was standing behind this guy waiting for the elevator in a hotel one time. We were down in the lobby and he was busy with lots of people coming and going, so he obviously hadn't noticed me. Elevator doors open, he gets in and turns to press the button for his floor, so he didn't see me walk past him on the other side. As soon as the doors closed, obviously he's still under the impression that he was alone. He lets rip the most heinous fart that went on for all of about 10 seconds. Mid-fart, out of the corner of his eye, he spots me standing just behind him. Poor guy almost jumped out of his skin. He's staring at me like he's seen a ghost. I'm staring at him with what I can only assume is a fairly horrified expression, trying to think of something to say to make this whole situation less awkward. As luck would have it, we're both going to the same floor, and he's staying in the room right across the corridor from me. So we have to endure an extra 30 seconds or so of mortified silence as we walk down the hall together. I thought about slipping a jokey note under his door. Should have stayed away from the shrimp tacos at the buffet, but decided against it. Should have done it. Would have broke some ice. Story 27. This happened in Korea when I was an exchange student. I had to get into the exam room in 3 minutes because I guess I was stupid enough to bring everything but my pencil case. Panicked a lot, wondering if I should buy a new one, but that would involve a long walk and the risk of being late. Then I decided to buy one. Halfway through my superpowered walk, I said, "Screw it, I'll just borrow from someone." Power walking back to the building again, I crashed into a girl holding a coffee, which spilled all over the floor. I thought, what am I supposed to do? Buy her a new one? I apologize profusely, but I can't speak their language. Exam in 1 minute. At this point, we were just kind of staring at each other, and when I came back to my senses, I just bowed repeatedly and left her like that. I could feel it was so tense and awkward. Damn, I still wince when I think about it. I don't think you should have done that, though. Story 28. Like probably many stories in the sub, this happened at a huddle house. My girlfriend, now wife, and I were eating with some friends, and I decided I needed to go to the bathroom. I got up, walked over to it, and tried the door. It was open, so I walked right in. The room was pretty big, with a urinal and sink on one side and a toilet on the opposite side. There was a guy in there at the urinal, and he gave me a really strange look when I walked in. So I went over to the toilet, had a whiz, and started actually processing my situation. The guy looked at me like I was really out of place. This toilet I'm using isn't in a separate stall. There's not much privacy in here. Oh God, this is a single-person bathroom. By this point, the guy had hastily run out after finishing his business.
I took care of my own affairs and had to do the walk of shame past him as I walked back to my table. I told my SO later that night, completely mortified. She thought it was hilarious. The look he gave me when I walked in is still burned in my head. She's right, it is hilarious. Story 29. Was adopted at birth, learned who my birth family was in my early 30s. Had met a sister, but nobody else yet. My sister told me my grandpa was being taken off life support due to cancer and wanted to talk to me before he passed away. I traveled to the hospital several hours away. I met my mom in the hospital lobby for the first time ever. We went to Grandpa's room where all of his and my family were. They were all there to say their goodbyes. Probably only 5% of them knew of my existence. Suddenly, all the attention was on me. The stranger. He had me kneel by his side and he apologized through tears for pressuring my mom, who I just met, to give me away for adoption. People looked pretty shocked, including me. The experience was 1,000 emotions and awkwardness was definitely in there somewhere. Story 30. This is the first thing that comes to my mind. I used to work at a supermarket. I was in the back room and someone told me a lady wanted some ribs. I find them and walk out there. I approached a Puerto Rican woman who knew very little English. She was the first person I saw. I was standing around. I assumed she was the person who wanted it. I asked her if the ribs were okay, and she looked at me weird. I asked if she wanted a different one, then she almost seemed a little scared. The employee who told me the customer who needed ribs was someone else. I felt very embarrassed and realized I looked like I was trying to sell some poor confused lady ribs. I probably looked like one of those pushy, annoying salespeople. Oops. The other awkward situations were the customers who knew very little English or had a strong accent and had to decipher what they were saying. Sometimes a person would have a speech impediment and I didn't want to look like a schmuck when I kept having to ask them to repeat themselves. It's painful to listen to someone and pretend you know what they are talking about, hoping they don't notice. Story 31. 3 days into a music festival. It's about 11 p.m. and I've been walking around and around the campsite for about 3 hours, trying to find my tent. I stopped to talk to people I didn't know, trading food I'd bought from stands around the campsite and cigarettes for beer and grass as we chatted. As I'm walking around, I see a group of friends who I didn't know were at the festival. I got pretty excited and bounded over to them, waving and calling some of their names. It wasn't until I got right over them and saw the confused look on their faces that I realized that I didn't actually know any of these people. There was maybe a passing resemblance to 1 or 2 people I actually knew, but it wasn't even close to being the group of people I thought I'd seen. I'm not sure if it was a hallucination or what, but I quickly got the heck out of there. I found my tent pretty soon after. Story 32. 1. New Year's Eve. I was on the strip in Vegas, just hating my life because I have intense anxiety, but tried to tough it out so that my wife would have a good time. We got to the end of the fireworks show and we started heading for the designated exit. I guess everyone had that idea because the crowd very quickly bottlenecked. People were all completely pressed together and it wasn't something we could control. There wasn't an inch to move. When we were mashed in, the guy beside me was pushing me up against my side, trying not to look at me. I could feel the dude's thing against my thigh or hip region. I'm pretty sure he knew it too, because he was focusing as hard as he could on the lights of the building up ahead. It was weird, but the whole Italian stallion thing felt pretty true. 2. I was at Kmart with my wife, and while we were looking for Christmas presents 2 years ago, my wife was checking her bank account online to make sure her direct deposit from work went in. She confirmed that it did and showed me the check amount. I can't remember it now, but it was a good enough check that I loudly wooed and started doing a weird little dance against her leg. I'm white. I don't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't realize that a man had come into the aisle before I started my money dance. When I stopped, I looked over, and the guy had the biggest smirk on his face, busted out laughing, and walked out of the aisle again. Story 33. Not me, but my dad. On a road trip, he hits up a coffee shop for lunch. There's an older gentleman there using a walker to get around. After my father finishes up, he heads to the washroom, and as soon as he opens the door, he sees the older guy in there, standing holding his walker. There was a trail of crap coming out of the stall, and he's standing there with his pants and garments around his ankles, and he, too, is covered waist to feet in crap. As soon as my dad opened the door, the man said, "I'm so sorry." He looked so crushed and defeated. My dad felt terrible for him. He quietly pulled a male employee aside, and the guy went in, and I guess they contacted someone for him, although I'm not super sure how that played out. Poor guy. Story 34. When I was about 13, I went on a school trip which included a boat ride to Lundy Island, for anyone who knows where that is. It was a windy day and the sea was rough, so like most of my friends, I got extremely seasick. The toilets were full of retching school kids, so when it was my turn to churn, I found a space along the rail and let loose. I aimed down at the sea, but the wind whipped my mess about 20 feet horizontally straight over a middle-aged man who was enjoying the sea air. As I watched in horror, I registered that he was being splattered with something. It was only when my second wave hit that our eyes met and I saw his face change from confusion to horror. I had no words, just more retch, so he hurried off, presumably to clean himself. Thankfully, I didn't see him again, but I'm sure I ruined his day. I'm sure he understood. Story 35. was at the grocery store with Mom at around 5-ish years old. No idea, just guessing. And I wandered off like most children do. And I realized she wasn't right behind me. I panicked and started to run up and down the aisles until I finally found her. I ran up and gave her the biggest hug with tears streaming down my face. It was then that she turned around and my scarred or horrified 5-year-old self screamed, "You're not my mom!" I was hugging some random and very confused lady who dressed similar to my mom. Luckily, my shriek was heard across the store and my mom found me less than 30 seconds later. Maybe not the most awkward I've felt with a total stranger, but definitely the story that stuck with me the longest. Story 36. Out for a bike ride in my neighborhood at about 12 at night a month ago. It was pitch black, other than streetlights every 5 or 6 houses. I was kind of just zoning out, enjoying the fresh air when something moved out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to look and I immediately assumed it was some kind of monster. I just finished a horror movie, so I let out an extremely loud scream in the middle of the night in a silent suburban neighborhood. The thing, which turned out to be a blonde soccer mom, screamed back at me with pretty good reason. I zipped past her on my bike, yelling, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," over and over again until I got off the street. I haven't gone on a nighttime bike ride since then. Story 37. One time, I was in middle school and someone parked right in front of our mailbox. Now, the annoying thing about that is that at my house, they could have pulled either 10 feet forward or backwards and would have not been right in front of our mailbox. So me being an annoying middle schooler went out to get the mail and also walked up to their car yelling, "Ugh, why do people always park right in front of our mailbox when there are other perfectly good places to park?" And as I was doing that, I made eye contact with a man who was sitting in the car. Yeah, it turned out he was an undercover cop watching someone down the street from us. And that's the story of how I accidentally yelled at a cop. Story 38. My dad loves buying clothes and whatnot for me, but he's bad at guessing my size. So he'll find a complete stranger that he thinks looks like me and have them try the stuff on, and then take their picture and send it to me. It's super freaking weird, and I can't get him to realize how creepy it is. My favorite pics he sent are a 5-year-old wearing a hat. We had the same hair color, and a scared-looking older woman wearing a coat. We were the same height. Your dad should be careful, he could be labeled a creep. Story 39. I went to see Avengers Infinity War with my boyfriend. The theater was packed, so I ended up sitting next to a kid who looked to be around 4 or 5. He's with his dad. Well, we all know how it ends. His favorite character starts to fade, and this kid is bawling and looks at his dad for comfort. His dad says, "Stop being a wuss, it's only a movie." So this kid looks at me and he's like bawling. The kind of cry where there's snot everywhere and he looks shell-shocked. I don't know what came over me, but I looked at the dad and was like, "Some people don't deserve to have kids," or something similar. And the dad was about to say something, and then the kid puts the armchair thing up a little and holds my hand and just cries. My boyfriend was watching the movie and looked over. I'm just crying with this kid. Before the credits roll, the dad is like, "We need to leave," picks his kid up and apologizes for his kid's behavior. After the movie, I made my boyfriend wait for everyone to leave because it felt so awkward. It was awkward and heartbreaking. I still think about that poor kid. Story 40. I'm walking down a city street in an area that wasn't exactly good, and this youngish woman wearing a tight black shirt and leggings asked me something. Somehow I decided in my mind that she was a street worker. I can't hear a damn thing she's saying over the din of the city, so I assumed she was asking for a cigarette lighter and respond, "Sorry, I don't have one." Who knows what she actually said and whether my response was a comically absurd response to whatever she heard herself say to me. Story 41. I was at a camp that my dad had been working at. I was about 8. There was a water slide, so I decided to go on it. There were 2 guys running the slide, spraying water and soap down the tarp. I went down the slide a couple of times and then decided to wrap up. The bathroom I was in was old school. One of the guys running the slide came into whiz, and so did I. He was about 17 or 18, looking super backwoods and southern. Even at 8, I knew something was wrong with him. After I got dressed, I went to whiz as well. It was still there, whizzing. As I started to go, the guy asked, "Did you know there was copper under the slide?" Yeah, it all wore away, but I still kept the peace. Look, with my naive mindset of do what adults say, I looked over to see his thing. I quickly turned away, staring at the wall until I finished, making me cringe just thinking about it. That man was 100% a creep. Story 42. I had to use a public restroom, and the guy in the stall next to me forgot to lower the volume or put his headphones in. I heard the jingle from a very specific company that makes animated corn. The person quickly made sure the video was no longer audible for me, but it was too late. I knew what he was going to do. I don't think he knew that I knew what he was watching, but to have to sit there waiting for my body to clean itself out while knowing that he's watching animated corn in the stall next to me made me nervous as all hell. Story 43. When I was a teenager, my dad and I went to one of those haunted houses where the scare actors can touch you. You had to sign a waiver when you bought tickets. It was actually a pretty cool house. The guy behind it really put a lot of thought and sweat equity into it. Anyway, as with a million other haunted houses, there was a lack of the Ripper actor. Terrible British accent attempt and straight razor and all. He grabs me and throws me on a bed and then kind of kneels on me, like his knees are on my shoulders. He demands my dad leaves the room. My dad doesn't because what the heck, this stranger has my kid pinned to a bed. So the next what seems like an hour unfolds as, number 1, my dad does not move. Number 2, Jack the Ripper kneels over my chest, rattling off bad Jack the Ripper line after bad Jack the Ripper line, trying to convince my dad to leave the room. 3, I'm prone on a bed, trapped underneath Jack the Ripper, very uncomfortable, and also starting to wonder if the straight razor might actually be real. Eventually relented. I got up. Plenty of other messed up things in that house. 10 out of 10 would go again. Story 44. So I went to a seated concert for the Paper Kites alone a few years ago because I love the band, and why the heck not? I like to get to these events early to see the opening bands, and because I don't like being late to concerts, so there weren't many people there. I showed the usher my ticket and he looked up the seat, then back to me and smiled brightly. Looks like your date is already here. I looked behind the usher to where my seat was, and with utter horror realized I was seated next to a cute guy who had also already taken his seat. But there were no other people seated in the row, and at least 4 rows in front and behind. It was literally only him in that whole area. My social anxiety kicked in big time, so I stammered something to the usher about not being on a date and awkwardly took my seat. Me and the guy had a brief laugh over it, but I just wanted to crawl into a hole and go away from embarrassment. As other people took their seats around us, many seemed to assume we were a couple on a date and gave us dirty looks when we were both on our phones, not talking in between bands. Never have I wanted to disappear more in my life. I kind of regret not talking to him more, though, as he was pretty cute and looked around the same age. But damn, I was so nervous and awkward.
What is your most horrifying, I thought no one was looking moment? Took a crap in the bathroom in a school building I was studying in at 2 a.m. I felt a bit hot and debated whether I should do it. I thought aloud in a hymn, "Oh, sensation, sensation, does thou dare aboard the M station? Cruel creation only for your relation." I say this a lot when I think by myself and I'm getting ready to do it. After a few seconds, I started doing it screaming. That's when I heard a toilet flush a few stalls down. I subsequently slapped myself in the face out of shame of my craziness. I would just melt into the toilet and then flush myself. Story 2. More something I said. I was walking down the hallway of my school. I proceeded to walk up the stairs, and with my arm full of books, for some reason I thought my body could handle the simple task of stairs, considering I'd been on them my entire life. I was wrong, of course, and my left foot caught on the staircase. I collapsed to the ground, face planting into a stair. My books exploded and scattered everywhere. I just looked up and screamed, "Can!" Then I saw an elderly professor staring down at me. He made a remark about noise in the hallway and smirked. Wrinkly schmuck didn't even help me. Story 3. When I first started working in New York City, I lived in Long Island and in nearly a 2-hour door-to-door commute via the Long Island Railroad. One night on the later train, I managed to grab a great seat, only to have them pull the train out of service and ask that we switch to a new train. For those that don't know, this is BS because now all the people that were late and forced to stand have the advantage of exiting first and getting to the new train for a seat. I got off and knew I had no shot at a seat as I was behind hundreds of people going up the escalator. Noticed that the down escalator was totally empty and decided to go for it. Ran my bum off to get to the top, took my final leap and came up short. Hit the deck flat on my face. Humiliated, I got back up and ran to the train. Got myself a seat too. Well, at least you got yourself a seat. Story 4. I have this weird condition where I suddenly yell out random things when I think no one is looking. It is not a tic, as I obviously have full control of it and do not feel particularly compelled to yell out things if it is near people. But whenever I'm alone in the car, walking somewhere, etc., I sometimes yell random stuff really loudly. I've always been this way. I interned at a hedge fund last summer. The company was located in the second floor of a building that had an unoccupied first floor. Every floor had a really nice restroom, but I quickly found out that there was an unmarked door that led to a restroom with a lot of stalls on the first floor that no one went to. I used to take great pleasure in taking long, luxurious craps down there. And whenever I walked into the secret restroom of joy, I would yell out, "Captain Crapstorm, reporting for duty!" and proceed to take an amazing crap. Well, one day, as I yelled those words and walked in, I saw a pair of women's legs in one of the stalls in the restroom that I thought no one knew about but me. It turns out that all the female interns from my hedge fund, only a handful and very attractive, went down there to take care of their business. And that was the second time one of them heard my pre-crap yelling ritual. It was probably the most awkward and cringeworthy day of my life. Ugh, another one. Story 5. I used to work at a Starbucks. We had this massive pair of tongs used for pulling paninis out of the oven. One closing shift, I had the brilliant idea of mimicking Pac-Man. I then proceeded to clap said tongs in front of my face while chanting, "Waka waka waka waka." And walking out onto what I thought was a completely empty sales floor, I was greeted by all the members of my new boyfriend's family. I froze. They were blankly staring at me. Awesome first impression. If I was part of his family, I would have liked you instantly. Story 6. I was in the park a few weeks ago and noticed a mini tornado or whirlwind nearby that was about 10 feet wide, whipping garbage and leaves around in a perfect circle. As it moved closer, I held my ground, and soon I was in the exact eye of the storm with flying debris circling around me. Accordingly, I clenched my fists and raised them to around chest level and looked to the sky with eyes squinting through dust and wind and let out a mighty extended roar to fully emphasize my powerful wizarding weather summoning skills. It was exhilarating. At least 5 people probably saw me, but I was unconcerned as they were mere mortals. Walked away like a boss as if it was nothing more than a morning stretch. I've never heard the phrase like a boss used in a sense since like 2012 or something. Story 7. Well, mine wasn't that nobody was looking, but that the wrong person was looking. Freshman year in college, I was in the dorms and I had a pretty goofy relationship with my roommate at the time. I heard as he entered the door, so I decided to do something funny, so I stood up in the center of her room and put my hand in my pants. I closed my eyes, headbanged, and waved my other hand wildly in the air. I heard the door swing open and I just went for it, shaking my head and both my arms in exaggerated fashions. When I opened my eyes to see his expression, I realized I was staring into the eyes of my roommate's father, whom I had not met yet. He was helping my roommate carry some groceries in from the car. Oh wow. Story 8. When I was a stupid 13-year-old, I was always coming up with inventive ways to prepare for kissing a girl. I tried kissing magazine pictures, awful, and the mirror, even worse, and a balloon. Seriously, don't bother. But I still felt woefully unprepared. One day I was at a department store and I saw a shapely half mannequin that was sequestered away from the general public, and I thought I would give it a shot. Had to be better than a balloon, right? Not so much. I guess mannequins aren't cleaned regularly because when I pecked it on the lips, the funky smell and oily film hit me like a brick. That brought me to my senses and I turned to leave. I had to find a water source to clean whatever filth I just touched my mouth to. That's when I heard the bizzed sound of servo motors and looked up at the security camera zooming in on me. Smile for the camera. Story 9. In college, I lived with 2 roommates in my second year. One weekend, they both went away back to their hometown, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to have my then-girlfriend over for some fun, sexy times without volume restraint. Saturday morning, we got it again right after getting up, and afterwards, I excused myself to go get some water. I walked out of my room and to the end of the bedroom hallway. When I opened my door, one of my roommates was standing there, about to light a cigarette. Inside, strictly verboten amongst us, we both just froze. We were staring at each other. Me, him with a cigarette hanging from his mouth, a lit match burning in his hand right next to the cigarette. I wheeled around after what seemed like forever and walked back into the bedroom where I fell over laughing. Story 10. A couple years ago, I was dating this guy that I had met on the internet who lived 5 hours away. We didn't get to see each other often, so we would webcam during periods we couldn't be together. I had a roommate at the time and she had just left for work while I was on the webcam with him. For some reason, my ex and I always turned on songs and would groove to them while on cam, so on this particular day, I turned on Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. I ended up dancing around my room, swinging my shirt around. Suddenly, I hear my roommate laughing her bum off because she had come back home to get her name tag. Now, anytime that song comes on, she says, "Please leave your shirt on." Story 11. I went to college about 4 hours from home. I was coming home for spring break one year. The Rents live in a rural area, and about the last 45 minutes of the trip, there was no place to stop and take a bio break. I didn't have to go at the last opportunity, so I drove right on by. I was about 20 minutes from home and felt the turd drop into the chamber. This wasn't a raggy moment right away. I felt I could hold it until I got home. It would only be about 20 more minutes. All was well. And as I approached home, I thought of the psychological fact of, yes, I made it. Set in, and the last mile of my trip was sheer panic. But alas, this is not a tale of me crabbing myself. This is a tale of not expecting anyone to be home. I made it in the front door, and as I was clinching the Bombay doors tightly, I started singing a little tune to take my mind off the torpedo that was good to go and ready to launch. Gonna crap in my pants, gonna crap in my pants, gonna crap in my pants. Over and over again. Walked into the kitchen and saw one of my mom's best friends who was there for a visit. Unbeknownst to me, Mom was at work. Horrified, I immediately changed my tune and played it off like I was just lazily singing some random tune. That was really catchy. Story 12. I was at the Metrodome for a Twins game. I developed a severe case of itchy bum, and it soon became clear that a booster wipe was imperative. Left the game and stood in the long line for stalls. When it was finally my turn, the large handicapped stall with a double-wide door was the one available. When I got in, I had some difficulty with a broken locking mechanism, but soon it got to seemingly latch. I then went to town on my itchy bum, facing the toilet so it would seem like I was taking a leak. I wiped once, and again, and a third time till it came back white. I threw the final tissue in the toilet, pulled up my pants, zipped, and flushed, finally turning around to leave the stall, only to see 20-plus very uncomfortable-looking men doing their best to avoid any eye contact with me. The stall door had silently swung wide open behind me. My shame laid bare for all the world to see. I wanted to make a beeline from the bathroom, but in light of what I had just been doing, and the fact that everyone knew it, that just wasn't an option. So head down, I darted to the sink, washed my hands, and got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I've never been so simultaneously embarrassed and amused at the same time. Despite my mortification, it was just too funny for me not to share. I bring down the house every time I tell this story. I would just disappear, man. Story 13. Oh God, here goes. Two-part story starts with a whole day trip with my dad and a couple of his friends. After eating a couple of burgers my dad made, I got a massive case of diarrhea. I went into the woods to hide in a couple of trees. No biggie, I thought, after evacuating an ungodly amount of crap. Later that day on the ride home, it happens again. Holy crap juice. My insides are turning. I'm trying to concentrate. It's 15 more minutes to home. We finally make it, and as I take that final leap out of the car, I accidentally crap myself in front of all my dad's friends. They, being the outstanding gentlemen that they were, decided to go get a couple of beers while I sorted my crap-covered self out. So here I am, taking a shower to get myself clean after the horrible incident and start to sing in the shower. I'm singing the Rocky theme at full power. Do-do-do, do-do-do. Finish my shower and say, screw it, no one's home. So I walk out while doing the Rocky theme and air punching like there's no tomorrow. Walk across the living room and I feel a presence. My dad and all his friends staring at me. What the heck faces all around? Not a proud moment. Story 14. My grandmother used to run estate sales for people who didn't know what to price things at and for people who were still grieving and couldn't be bothered. I always came to help out at her estate sales because it was fun to jack around with some random people's old stuff. So one time, when I was like 17, I was super spiked hanging out at some dude's house when I found a pump, a fella, by the way, and I thought, oh, what the heck, and started to pump myself for man milk. Not 10 seconds later, a shirt over the back of my neck and hooked up to a pump, my grandmother does this, and not a word of it was ever spoken of again. Wait, what happened? Story 15. During junior high, 7th to 9th grade, I wore those laceless shoes that had the 2 elastic strips that held them on your foot. When I was in the bathroom washing my hands, one of my friends told me that kid, every class, has one extraordinarily mentally challenged kid who somehow doesn't end up in the special ed class. This was him, had the exact same shoes as me, and that he was currently in one of the stalls. Out of curiosity, I ducked down quickly to look at the shoes and confirm my friend's claim. At that exact moment, the geology teacher, whose class I was going to next, walked into the bathroom and saw me during that half a second I was ducked down looking at the kid's shoes. The next hour of class was horrible. The teacher didn't like me in the first place and kept making semi-homosexual remarks with regards to anything I did. When I was walking up to return a test sheet that period, I dropped it and had to pick it up. When I went down to pick it up, he said something like, "Hey, I don't want you looking at any more garments while you're down there, like you do in the men's restrooms. You'd better stand up quickly." I think that moment in the bathroom, along with all the ramifications it entails, makes it my most horrifying I thought nobody was looking moment. Kind of mentally scarring for a 13-year-old. What'd you think was going to happen? Story 16. When I was 13 or 14, I was caught in bed with my girlfriend at the same age, by her father. We were at her place, in her room, and he wouldn't usually get home until 5 or 6, so we had a couple of hours to go. He opens the door with a smirk on his face and says, "You two should probably get dressed and come downstairs." So, I got dressed and ran out of the seldom-used front door, biking to a friend's house. By the time I got home, he had gone to my parents' house and had a talk with him. My parents confronted me and I was embarrassed, so I lied, saying that it wasn't what it looked like. I wasn't allowed at their house anymore. Story 17. So this one time, it was really early in the morning, like before there's even a line at the Timmy's. I was walking across the bridge at Quebec and I didn't see a person or car in front of me. I felt a rumble where I kept fresh beer, which told me a huge fart just put on its blinker and was looking for an exit. I thought to myself, hey, it's really early, why not give this blast some thrust on the way out? And I really freaking pushed. So loud I could hear it over my headphones. So loud it made me laugh. All of a sudden I got real self-conscious, like maybe somebody's behind me. I turned around and see a total babe walk past real fast, holding her breath. And I just kept laughing. I must have thought I was crazy. Story 18. I was the someone who was looking. Once. There's an ice cream shop down the road from my place. The girlfriend and I were walking past and I noticed that there were no customers inside. And the lone employee, a teenage guy, was inside balancing his baseball cap with its visor on his chin. I stopped and pointed it out to my girlfriend and we watched through the window. As he successfully balanced it for another 2 minutes. It finally fell, he turned and noticed us golf clapping for him in the street, and he turned bright red. I think he was really embarrassed, but he shouldn't have been. It was awesome. Story 19. I live in Sweden, and we do have snow in the winter, as you know. A couple of years ago, when I was living with my parents, I had my own little cabin, with no toilet. Anyway, since I couldn't really go anywhere without plowing snow, I just opened the door, stood there on my little porch with my thing over the railing, and whizzed. I used to do this for quite some time until my neighbor walks by and sees me standing there with my thing over the railing, kind of bending backwards. What are you going to do? She's already seen me. She walked by and stared at me. Also, when I got aware of this, I think my neighbor saw me a couple of times. They had a house like 3 houses from ours with a window upstairs towards my cabin. He must have. Story 20. Didn't think no one was looking, but misjudged who was looking. Was filming in a building downtown. Our site rep for the building was kind of a crazy job. I had to use the regular passenger elevator for moving equipment up because the cargo elevator was being serviced that morning. On one of my buddy's trips up to the set, we were addressing the elevator doors opened up to the site rep, doing bad karate moves towards him as a joke. A really weird joke that lasted a good 10 awkward seconds from my buddy. Anyway, that became the joke of the day. Anytime the door would open, one of us would be waiting there doing bad karate moves towards each other. On one of my trips back to the truck, I saw the cargo elevator moving and 2 sets of legs along with it. Figuring it had been repaired and my 2 buddies were riding it down, I immediately went into exaggerated karate mode. It was then I realized that it was not, in fact, my 2 pals who I had been sharing the joke with all day, but the 2 elevator repair guys testing the cargo elevator. They looked extremely confused as to why I was practicing karate moves in front of a cargo elevator alone while staring at them. I didn't say a word, stopped, turned, and walked away. Story 21. The scene. A somewhat crowded shopping center. Her, a gorgeous and extremely fit young lady, is walking in front of me and my friend. Us. 2 extremely stimulated Iranian boys. There's a reason there's a stereotype they were sleazy club owners. What happened? My friend turns to me and Farzi begins to outline in disgusting detail all the things he wants to do to her. Even for someone who lives in my level of deprivation, it was a truly incredible bacchanalian description. Not to be outdone, I begin to outline my own plan for this attractive young lady and, in turn, create a scenario that would make the Marquis de Sade blush. Just as I finish, this amazing-looking girl turns around and begins to lambaste us in perfect Farsi. Not only had she heard what we had said, but she proceeded to tell us why she would never engage in anything with 2 pathetic, desperate, and creepy-looking Iranian guys who would stalk behind her. It was a humbling experience that led to significant self-betterment in the long term. Story 22. When I was a teenager and my parents were away for the weekend, I decided that it would of course be the perfect opportunity for a self-extravaganza. I got hold of some corn and set myself up nicely in the living room with the normal accoutrements. After having a great first, I was ready for another go. Cue furious and almost violent tugging, legs akimbo. Some really uninhibited crap. And then, on looking slightly to the right of the TV, I see movement in the door. After quickly putting my thing away and muting the various sounds coming from the TV, I spring to my feet and cautiously make my way to the door, in time to glimpse the fleeing back of what appears to be a young child exiting our driveway. I believe they may have been selling chocolates or some other school fundraising effort. Since then, I've been sure to keep my session within reasonable limits and out of public view. Why were you in public view in the first place? Story 23. I'm sure everyone has done this before, but when I was like 10 years old, I was at a ranch out in the woods, basically a resort in the woods, but it was small. Either way, everyone would eat at the same time, then would all go and play by the pool or campfire. There would be about 50 of us. Well, one night, after dinner, 10-year-old me went up exploring and went up to the dining room. I was completely alone and I had to fart, so I decided I would glorify it. I kid you not. I stood up on a chair, lifted my leg to as much of a 90-degree angle I could make, and let it fly. I turned around and there's 2 of the table washers just staring at me. I turned a red that matched the color of their cleaning bucket. Happened on day 2 of 7. I stayed by the campfire from then on. Also that moment when I found out they actually watch you in dressing rooms. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 24. Growing up, my friends and I used to play ghetto baseball. Wiffle ball bats stuffed with newspaper and duct taped and tennis ball at the common grassy area by my friends' houses. Being around 13 years old and no washroom around, I used to whiz in these bushes that were next to a house where this mean lady lived. No issues, whatever. This lady sucked anyway. Screw her bushes. I moved to a neighboring town and now I'm in high school where I met this girl at a party and we started dating. I get invited for dinner at her house and of course, it's the house that I used to whiz on where the old lady lived. I laugh to myself and go inside to meet the family over dinner. In the middle of dinner, the older sister goes, Holy crap, I knew you looked familiar. I stopped chewing, thinking, what the heck? You're the kid that used to whiz in the bushes all the time. I sat there poker faced, thinking, no freaking way. They didn't live there when I did this, but how? Wait, no, how could you possibly know? Then my own freaking girlfriend chimes in, oh my god, older sister, you're right, he is. We have just lost cabin pressure. Apparently the old lady moved or passed away or something, and unknowingly to me, my now girlfriend's family had moved in. At this point, I'm about to just excuse myself and go pass away under a rock somewhere, and her ultra cool father steps in and while laughing says, well, tonight, son, you don't have to use the bushes. You have several bathrooms for you to choose from. Dinner was still a little awkward, but I survived and was invited back. Of course, I would get a good ribbing every time I would use the restroom, but I went with it because I was with their daughter. I love the Fight Club reference. Story 25. So a few weeks ago, me and my friends were playing 3 versus 3 basketball in my house with 2 teams of 5. About 30 or so minutes in, I really had to go to the bathroom, so I called timeout and switched with someone who wasn't playing. At that point, I couldn't go to the bathroom in my house because, frankly, I couldn't hold it much longer. I ran around to the other side of the house and proceeded to do my thing into a pot with some flowers that I normally use when I'm outside. I can't hold it in long enough to rush inside. As I looked up after I was finished, I hadn't looked up the entire time, I saw my mom staring at me. All she said to me was, watering the flowers too much isn't good for them. Mom is a comedian. Story 26. New girlfriend, haven't really met her mom yet. I was invited over to her house. Girlfriend answered the door. I gave her a hug and told her I needed to use the washroom really quick. She pointed me to the washroom and I closed the door. For some reason, I was self-conscious that her and her mom could hear me whizzing, so I crouched down on my knees and aimed to whiz directly into the side of the bowl. Her mother comes downstairs and goes right for the washroom, not knowing I've arrived yet. She opens the door and sees me crouched in front of the toilet with my thing in my hand and immediately slams the door shut. It was awkward for a while after that. They even made fun of me for it. God only knows what they thought I was doing. Story 27. This happened a couple of years ago when I was working at my old job. It was a Friday afternoon and the showroom had been super quiet all day. I was the only one there. One of the sales reps phoned me around 2 p.m. to tell me that a client and a designer would be dropping by sometime in the afternoon. Could I please let them in and show them some samples? Okay, no problem. 3 p.m. came and then it was 4 p.m. No phone calls, no client visits, nothing. Normally, I would leave at 4 on Friday, but I decided I'd better stay until 5, albeit rather grudgingly. At 4:45, I figured that these people weren't coming, so I began shutting down the showroom and packing my stuff to leave. Then at 4:55, the doorbell rang. I figured that if I let them in, I'd be there until 6 or 6:30, and I really just wanted to get out there and start my weekend. So I didn't answer the door. I figured that I'd wait a few minutes, they'd go away, and I'd be able to leave. The only thing was that the door was surrounded by giant floor-to-ceiling windows, so I couldn't move around in the office or showroom without being caught. After a few minutes, the doorbell rang again. 4:58. I was definitely not answering the door. I thought that in order to be safe, I should wait until 5:05 before trying to leave, just to make sure. At 5:05, I decided to get down on my stomach and peek around a cupboard at the door or window area to make sure the coast was clear. It wasn't. The client and his designer were standing there at the door, looking in through the window, and they saw my head peeking out from behind the cupboard. I know they saw me because they waved at me. So I had to get up and go answer the door and try to explain that I didn't hear the doorbell. Both times. And failed at making up some reason why I was on the floor. I don't think they believed me. And they stayed until 6:30 looking at samples. I felt like an idiot the whole time. Yeah, you kind of were. Story 28. I doubt anybody will see this down here, but anyways, I'll go ahead and tell it. Sophomore year of college, I was on the rowing team. The weather wasn't yet warm enough to be on the water, so we were inside in the ergs, rowing machines. We had some hard workouts. I can't quite remember what, but it was an interval workout with 3 minutes on and 2 minutes off for 25 minutes or something along those lines. The point is that it was intense. More intense than normal. The intenseness of the workout was making me have to fart, but the constant use of my leg or abdominal muscles prevented me from letting them out. So after the 25 minutes, we have a 5-minute break before the next 25-minute piece, and I go over to the water fountain to get a drink. I had my music blasting and was exhausted, so I didn't really notice my surroundings at all. I just took a quick glance around before bending down to drink. While I was drinking, all the gas that had built up came to a head and was ready to burst. Still bent over and drinking, I let it rip. I swear, it was the loudest, largest volume fart I had ever expelled in my entire life. I have still yet to top it. The force of my cheeks vibrating was violent enough to the point that it made my back sore afterwards. It was a full second. Seriously, say 1001. That's how long. Of absolute maximum flatulent thrust. I felt like I had expelled my entire lung capacity out of my back. Feeling rather pleased with myself, I stood up and turned to go back to the ergs. To my horror, standing directly behind me, seriously, not more than a foot from my back, was a girl waiting to drink. She didn't look up, she didn't move in any way, and her facial expression was completely frozen with her mouth wide open, eyes staring at where my back had been. I quickly shuffled away and looked behind me after walking about 50 feet, and she still hadn't moved. I spent the rest of the next piece bursting into random fits of giggles. It became a bit of a team joke. To this day, I'll sometimes think about it and burst out laughing. I also giggle at the fact that she may have seen who I was before standing behind me, and every time she sees me on campus, all she can think about is that one scarring moment in her life. She definitely wrote that in her journal that day. Story 29. When I was in middle school, my friend and I used to whiz all over the bathroom floors. We sort of became notorious around the school, as the principals and administration were basically playing detectives trying to figure out who was constantly whizzing on the floors for the janitors to clean up. One day, my friend and I were both doing our routine, draining our things together, just spraying everywhere we could that wasn't the stall, when one of the old fat janitors walked in on us out full-on whizzing. Now, the way we were positioned was such that my friend had time to see the janitor walk in and pull his pants up without having the janitor see him. I, however, was in the worst position possible. I remember turning around and only seeing the janitor looking at me with my thing hanging as whiz was pouring out. My friend had completely bailed, never to get a punishment. The janitor then said, "Come with me." I said, "What did I do?" I ended up getting 3 days out of school suspension. Needless to say, I haven't whizzed in a bathroom floor since. Story 30. Several years ago, I was working as a nurse at a local nursing home. Nurses were required to wear white pants so that we were identifiable from the other employees and nurses' aides. Now, on this particular day, I had been very busy before going into work in the evening and had hastily dressed for my shift. I had a resident that was in hospice care and expected to pass away very soon. All of his family, about 15 people, were in his room with him. I went in to assess him, check vitals, and provide some basic comfort care. After a bit of work, I noticed it had become very quiet in the living room, and finally someone asked me, "So, you like football, huh?" I thought it was quite an odd question, but answered anyway with, "It's okay." Then someone told me that according to my garments, I loved football. I then remembered that I had taken a pair of my daughter's garments out of the dryer earlier that day and worn them. They were red and white, striped with, "I love football" on the back. The whole room had a great laugh while I turned various shades of red. Afterward, they told me that they had been so tense with the predicament of waiting for their loved one to pass away that the laughter I unwittingly provided really helped them a lot. I have never forgotten to wear plain tan garments under my white pants again. Story 31. I took a seat in the bare ceramic throne surrounded by 3 green stall walls in the bathroom of my school's library. I released a stream of horrid brown mess into the white, water-filled bowl. My intestines granted me a brief respite. I assessed that the time was right for an intermission wipe and courtesy flush. So I make myself a thrice-folded rectangle of white sanitary paper and I wipe. It glides over the layer of filth coated to my back crack, but manages to scrape off at least a bit. For some reason, I take it out of the bowl to examine it. In case there was a problem. There wasn't a problem until I dropped it. Even then, there wasn't a problem until it floated face down under the stall and onto the sandaled foot of the young man in that neighboring green cubicle. All was quiet. Story 32. A couple years ago, Burning Man. While running around one night wearing a pink bodysuit, knee-high boots, and giant afro wig, I decided to eat some substance. The pill kicked in, and as I was walking back into the camp, and I thought it'd be funny if I let out a fart in front of a few of my campmates. Now, it is a stimulant, which therefore loosens everything up inside you, so I wind up not just farting, but also blowing a considerable load of shiza into my jumpsuit. I'm like, well, crap. So I grab a beer and a flashlight and do that awful waddle walk a couple 100 yards down to the porta potties to go try to remedy the situation. I sit down in the porta potty, put my beer in the toilet paper dispenser, pull down the jumpsuit, assess the damage, and luckily, the mess has all been more or less contained within the leg bands of my garments. But in order to get them off, I'm going to have to untie my giant knee-high boots and pull the whole jumpsuit off, in the tight constraints of the porta potty, in the dark, while... This does not sound appealing to me. So, I decide I'm going to rip my garments off. So I start tugging at the waistband, trying to tear it. It's not freaking tearing. So I find a clean spot on it, lean way down and start trying to gnaw through the waistband of my garments. Just then, the door opens and there's this girl outside shining a headlamp into the porta potty and sees this unholy sight before her. She screams out this, "Ah!" Slams the door, causing the beer to fall off the toilet paper dispenser and spill into my wig. And from outside, she's still screaming and I can hear some girl with her saying, "What is it? What's in there?" Headlamp girl is shrieking, I don't know. The first thing that comes to my mind to say is, "There's a person in here. I'm just a person. I'm not doing anything weird." It was a while before I came out of that porta potty. I think some integral part of my being might still be there. Story 33. I was in second grade. I'd been talking to a friend in class so relentlessly and generally being distracted from my work to the extent that the teacher moved my desk to the far upper corner of the classroom, several feet away from the rest of the group of desks. I was sort of in front of the class, facing away from them all toward the front of the classroom. While we were having our lesson and I felt that I was off to the side and out of attention range enough to pick my nose, I began digging away and pulled out what I assumed to be a harmless small booger. Well, what I pulled upon turned out to be a seemingly endless and considerable, thick, several-inch long cord of super snot. A good 7 inches or so if it had been pulled from my nose before I realized it, and now I was panicking. Hand over my face, trying to figure out what I could possibly do to dispose of, discreetly, no less, this amazing snot monster. Just then, to my great horror, the teacher called on me to answer a question. Nearly every kid in the class and the teacher now had their eyes on me. I'm sitting there still cupping my hand full of snot in front of my face, desperately trying to hide the anaconda of mucus that is still protruding from my nostril. Red in the face, all I could do was respond with, "I have to blow my nose." The teacher responded to this with, "Blow my nose isn't the answer." She asked me to remove my hand from in front of my face, and I responded with, "I can't. I have to blow my nose." The entire class erupted into laughter, and I was graciously allowed to leave my seat to retrieve a tissue, with everyone watching. Well, at least they didn't see the snot monster. Story 34. I wasn't really caught doing anything. I used to work in the produce section of a grocery store and would have to go in at 5 a.m. to cut up fruit trays and such so that they were in the store early. The night before, I drank a bunch of Bud Lime Light and ate a lot of greasy pizza, which created a vortex of nastiness inside me. Well, I woke up, showered, and on my way to work, I felt some extreme movements. I ran to the employee bathroom in the back of the store and unleashed a demon baby and stank up the bathroom. I washed my hands, pretty much laughing at the smell, opened the door, and the cute girl from the bakery, who starts working at 4 a.m., was waiting outside the door. I walked away and knew that her time spent in the bathroom wasn't pleasant and that she would continue to never talk to me. Story 35. Mine happened in a mission trip to India in college. Our entire group had been struck with a relentless bout of violent, explosive I remember being soundly asleep one night when my gut started bubbling. I lay in my sleeping bag, sure that the urge could wait till morning, but my bowels had other plans, and it was soon evident that holding it simply would not do. The outhouse of a rural village was located a few hundred yards away in the brush. I would have to make a run for it. As I scurried into the darkness of the early morning, it became painfully obvious that my sphincter was no match for the unholy force brewing within me. I peeled away from the path and climbed to the backside of a small hill. Satisfied that this spot was sufficiently secluded, I prepared to unleash the typhoon. It felt like someone had shoved a fire hose into my mouth and was purging me through my back. The sound of my bum flapping in the breeze rang through the still air like a trumpet heralding the victorious escape of whatever foul beast had infected my gut. My eyes closed and my head fell back in sweet relief. And it was at that moment. The sun peeked over the horizon. It washed over me and suddenly I could see everything. Unfortunately, what I saw was that the side of the hill I had chosen to squat on was directly facing the camp where the women were staying. 2 little Indian ladies and 3 of the girls from our group were out washing morning dishes. They stared open-mouthed as I squatted, gilded and immortalized in the light of the rising sun, looking over my shoulder at them. Story 36. Nobody will ever read this, but here it goes. It was my junior year of high school. Every year at my school, the junior class goes on a mountain hiking trip, aptly named Junior Mountain Trip. So it was the second day of trekking up rocky trails in the woods. As one might imagine, the physical activity coupled with the fibrous diet of the day before had loosened my bowels quite a lot. So we were setting up camp for the second night when my stomach started to really hurt. I felt dizzy and I sweated profusely. It was near dinner time and I had to finally excuse myself. I took with me the ration toilet paper and the trowel to dig the hole. Much to my dismay, the area where we made camp was surrounded by really thick foliage and I couldn't find much of a place to properly conceal myself. So I walked down the trail, turned a corner where I would be hidden from the group. The horde was at the gate, so to speak. I couldn't wait any longer, so there was a small log that was in the middle of the path and I figured that would be a decent place to sit. I took the trowel and tried to dig a hole, but the dirt on the trail was hard-packed and I barely made a dent. I said screw it, dropped my pants and released the kraken. It was an enormous relief. The problem was, it had taken a long time and dinner was ready and one of the guides came looking for me. Unfortunately, she happened to be extremely good looking. She came down the path to find me crouching right in the middle of the trail taking a massive crap. The best thing I could do was wave to her and look away. She knew what was up, so she turned right around back to the group. I came out of it all right, covered it with a little dirt and went back to the group for dinner. Unfortunately, the next day when we broke camp, I asked one of the guides which way we were going to be heading. He pointed down the same path I'd gone the night before, so we were heading down as a group and the whole group had to pass my huge festering pile of dirt-covered crap. It was brutal.
Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.